Good afternoon. We're back in session just after 1:30 on May 6th for a continuation of our work reviewing the FY25 operating budgets and the FY25 to 30 capital improvements program. We're going to move on in our agenda to item 6, which is a work session on the budgets of the Department of Transportation General Fund. I see we have Director Conklin here and Mr. Kenny, along with Office Management and Budget. Let me turn it over to the Transportation Environment Chair, Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are taking up the FY25 operating budget for the Department of Transportation General Fund. Right now, the General Fund is being proposed at $64 million, which is largely split. $57 million for the general fund and $7.5 million for leaf collection, really important in our community. But overall, this item is to improve the safety and update our transportation network to make sure that our roads are functioning and safe for everybody. The Transportation and Environment Committee approved these items unanimously. I'll invite Director Conklin for any introductory comments he might have.
Thank you, Chair Glass. I'd just like to mention that the enhancements that were proposed were largely around improving the amount of maintenance we're doing to preserve the life of pavements, safety-related improvements for increasing the amount of striping that we're doing on an annual basis, and also to try to work on the backlog of tree maintenance, particularly stumps. So I think those are all, they're items that have been underfunded in the past, and it would be great to have additional funding to support those. Thank you.
Resurfacing slurry seal is a big item. It's important. People might not know what it is, but they know when we don't have it. So thank you, Director Conklin, for accentuating that. I'll turn it over to Mr. Kenny for the details.
Thank you. So as you pointed out, this year's $64.6 million budget for the Transportation General Fund and leaf vacuuming funds is an increase of a little over $5 million, or an 8.43% increase that you'll see reflected in the packet from last year's budget. Most of this increase comes from the general fund. And most of that can be split between around $1.7 million in increases to service that you'll see reflected on the next page of the packet as additions to the new and enhanced programs list, and just under $4 million increases in compensation that, again, considering as a separate item. So moving on to the to those items that are being added to the new and enhanced programs list, there are 5 items, many of which Director Conklin just touched upon. There's the enhancement. There's a $700,000 increase into the enhancement of residential resurfacing slurry seal. The T&E committee has talked about in the past the need to increase pavement maintenance and restoration in accordance with recommendations from the Infrastructure Maintenance Task Force. So I wanted to highlight that item as what that increase is about, as well as enhancements to tree removal and planting, traffic markings, new subdivision road maintenance, and the inspection of short span bridges. In addition, the county executive proposed 2 decreases that will impact service. One is the elimination of temporary unprotected on-street bike lane reviews, and a reduction in low utilization stations within the bike share program. And more details on exactly which stations and some of the performance figures that led to that decision can be found on the last page of the packet as a full list of the stations. The T&E committee unanimously approved these changes, as well as all of the other changes reflected on circle page 4 of the packet that were neither reductions to service nor additions to the new and enhanced programs list. Happy to go into further detail on any other of those items.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Thank you, Director Conklin. Mr. President, that is the report out on this very straightforward item. And again, the Transportation Environment Committee unanimously supports these budget items.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Conklin and Mr. Kenny. I don't see any comments from colleagues, so we will take a vote on this item. All those in favor of the committee recommendation, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. We're going to move on to item 7, still with the Department of Transportation, now the Mass Transit Fund and FY25 Transportation Fees, Fines, and Fares Resolution. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
That is, there's lots of T's and F's in that with the FY25 Transportation Fees, Fines, and Fares Resolution. This county executive item is recommending nearly $194 million for the Mass Transit Fund, and we know how incredibly important that is to make sure that people can get around our community, taking Ride-On and the other transportation networks that we have. And just want to use a point of personal privilege to say that our transit network, particularly Ride-On, is the second largest in the DC region, and that was a point of conversation just last week when the Council of Governments Board of Directors met with WMATA's Board of Directors for the very first time, and appreciate the leadership of Vice President Stewart in starting that conversation last year, and County Executive and I were there, this is really important, and appreciate the County Executive maintaining these levels of service and keeping Ride-On at $1 within our jurisdiction. Director Conklin, anything you want to add there?
Again, I'll speak to the enhancements that are reflected in here. Both of these are important. We are in the midst of constructing the Great Seneca Transit Network, so it will be ready to be operational with this budget year. So that is the lion's share of the increases you see in this budget. The others are personnel related, and then there's some enhancement for the shelter maintenance, which we're struggling to keep up with the current budget level. So that's the other element here.
And that Great Seneca Transit Network is an enhancement of about $3.5 million for what will become, or what currently is, the Pink and Lime lines. So, Mr. Kenny, anything to add?
So covered most of it. The $3.5 million increase to the for the Great Seneca Transit Network will provide for 27 FTEs, 25 bus drivers, operators, and 2 supervisors to run these Pink and Lime lines. You'll see the other service increase being added to the new and enhanced programs list is the 3% inflationary adjustment to nonprofit service provider contracts. You've seen this item across a number of county agencies, and I believe the council will be taking up this item either today or tomorrow as a standalone item across agencies. And the rest, so that $3.5 million increase mostly comes from the Great Seneca Transit Network, and then there's the lion's share of the rest of the about $13.9 million increase to the Mass Transit Fund comes from an $11.3 million increase to compensation and overtime. So that's most of what is accounting for this increase.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. And Mr. President, that is T&E Committee unanimous recommendation for this item.
Thank you. I see one of your T&E colleagues would like to speak on this. Let me turn it over to her now. Councilor Bell.
Thank you. I just really want to lift up the Great Seneca Science Corridor Transitway. It's that area has been really trying to get transit for so many years. The Corridor Cities Transitway was supposed to service that area. We're looking at a new master plan that we're going to get over the summer, and it's just so critical, and I really appreciate all the work, Director Conklin, that your team has done to get this moving forward, so thank you.
Really excited to see that finally moving forward, long awaited in the community. I will say there's just a tremendous amount of investment that's happening in the Up County. It must be because of the current representation in the Up County here, and certainly we appreciate the work of the department and work of the committee. I don't see any other colleagues wishing to speak. So with that, we'll take a straw vote on the unanimous committee recommendation on this item. All those in favor, raise your hand. That is unanimous, and we're going to move on. Keeping in our theme currently of the Transportation and Environment Committee with the Vision Zero NDA, let me turn it back to the chair.
We're building roads. We are funneling public transit. Now we're going to keep our streets and sidewalks safe for pedestrians, bicyclists, and all users, and that is through the Vision Zero NDA. I see Mr. Holland is joining us. The Transportation Environment supports this budget, which is about $210,000, largely funding Mr. Holland and his work. There are some increases which are the result of a state grant that he can explain in a little bit more as well, and some additional outreach to members of our community, non-English native speakers, to make sure that the streets are safe for everybody. But this is a workhorse of a small budgetary line item, but incredibly important. Mr. Holland, do you have any opening comments?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for your support for Vision Zero. I know we've all spoken to every single member about safety projects in your area and appreciate your support for Vision Zero. Councilmember Glass summarized it really well. It's largely supporting myself and a small part of our activities. And this year, the new addition is really the federal grant that we were awarded, and it uses some of the operating funds as a match, just 20% match for a federal grant.
That's great. Thank you. And Mr. Kenny?
Yeah, not much to add here, just to note that this $50,000 increase to the enhanced outreach efforts through the La Abuelina program is the only item from the Vision Zero NDA that will be added to the new and enhanced programs list, because this $160,000 increase from the grant is grant supported.
Very good. And so, Mr. President, there you go. That is T&E committee unanimous recommendation. And again, just want to accentuate the point that Mr. Holland noted, that we got a federal grant and our match is only 20%, which is wonderful in terms of the grant world. So
We appreciate that. 80-20 is a good deal for us, so we'll like to see more of that, and appreciate our federal partners for their help and support in securing some of that funding. I don't see any colleagues wishing to speak on this. We have a unanimous committee recommendation on the Vision Zero NDA. All those in favor, please raise your hand. We have a unanimous straw vote on that, and we're going to move it back to the final item for this portion of the meeting, to the Chair of Transportation and Environment on utilities.
as noted, the final T&E item for today is our utilities NDA, and we got to make sure we pay for the lights that we have turned on throughout the county, but we are using more efficient lights, and so it is important to note that because we've been improving the quality and nature of our lighting, traffic signals and street lighting only account for 25% of our expenditures in this item. It used to be nearly half, about 45% or so. So our environmental activities are working, and in terms, they are helping lowering the cost here. And also they're helping meet our climate goals, recognizing that these efforts have reduced thousands of tons of greenhouse gas emissions from our local community and helping us meet our climate goals. There has been a discussion last year in particular about how we pay for our utilities, and that is the conversation that I expect we'll have in a robust manner here in a few moments. The Transportation and Environment Committee, after reviewing this NDA, has unanimously recommended that at least $10 million, that this go into the FY25 budget as part of a baseline effort. We talk about truth in budgeting, and we know that we have to pay our bills, and instead of dipping into the reserves or using a supplemental appropriation to pay our utilities, we think it would be better if we are upfront and add it to the base budget. And so I'll turn it over to DGS to expand a little bit more, and Mr. Mia, before we engage in a conversation with colleagues. But that is the item of debate that we have now put before the full council. Mr. Mayor, you want to tee us up, and then I'll have Mr. Arcent and whoever else.
That's correct. Just for context, the executive did not recommend any increases for utility costs beyond $2.9 million, which is for doing microgrid work at county facilities. And just to also note that council staff did recommend an alternative, which is to place 2 tranches of $5 million each onto the new enhanced programs list to give the council more flexibility in choosing among priorities. So that is an option before you as well.
Very good. Mr. Arcent or anyone else?
I'm going to ask Gary Nalvin with
Great,
OMB.
thank you.
Gary Nelvin, OMB. Just want to thank the T&E committee with their work cooperating on the development of the utilities budget. We're happy to see the emphasis on truth in budgeting, and we hope that we can be able to right-size this utilities budget moving forward.
So, Mr. President, there is a unanimous T&E recommendation to add these funds and emphasize that they should be not on the new and enhanced list, that they should be placed in the budget as their own line item. And I defer to you and await robust conversation from colleagues.
Thank you. I see the other member of the Transportation and Environment Committee, Vice President Stewart.
Great, thank you, and thank you to Chair Glass for teeing that up. And the other piece of context for my colleagues and why we unanimously voted to move the $10 million more than the county executive requested into our budget was because we have a supplemental coming to us tomorrow for $11.3 million for utilities, because when we were budgeting last year, we didn't actually cover the cost of utilities. And because we have a lot on our plate to look through, we really thought that we, as was said by OMB and the chair, we need to do our truth in budgeting. And utilities is something we can pretty much predict how much it's going to cost. And so I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar, that we do have that supplemental tomorrow, and what we're trying to do is avoid another supplemental in the future. So thank you.
Appreciate that. So the 10 million is essentially to offset the 11.3 million with the supplementals, so that we don't get into a perpetual cycle of supplementals. How does the 11.3 million and the 10 million compare to the decision made at the end of the last budget to not fund the utilities amount? What was that number?
That amount, last year the CE had recommended a $9.6 million increase, which was not funded in the approved budget.
So the 9.6 million is essentially, the 10 million is the rounded off number of the 9.6 million that was ultimately not funded last budget, and it's came in a little bit above, but similar to that number with the 11.3 million over expenditure that now needs to be funded through a supplemental. Let me turn it to Councilmember Joando.
Thank you. Just want to make sure I understand the administration's position. Sounds like you supported the committee adding the money in, but the county executive did not include the request in his budget. And just could you explain the discrepancy there?
So I think the executive was probably taking his lead from council and wanting to reserve the budget capacity for other things, given that the recommended increase last year was not included in the budget that was transmitted.
Okay, so you said, well, you didn't give it to me last year, so I'm not going to try again this year.
I can't speak exactly to what the executive
That's what it
was
sounds
thinking
like
at the
you
time.
said.
But
I mean, in other words, I'm just saying, okay, so that basically, okay. And then to the council president's last question, over the years, what has been the average, amount that we're having to come back and do a supplemental?
Well, the supplemental.
I know last year we didn't do, we
Correct.
didn't,
In FY22 we
it
did
was
not.
asked for 9 million in the regular budget process. The council did not approve that. And so the supplemental that's coming tomorrow is 11.3, which is
For this current year.
for this current year. And the proposal from T&E is to bake that 10 million
To next year.
into next year.
Right.
Is that a pretty consistent number over the last several years?
can I provide some context?
Sure, please.
So prior to last year, we actually had utility costs that had decreased due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We had a lot of county facilities that were closed, and we didn't see some of the commodities increases that we often see every year for utilities.
Utilities at home went up for county government, they went down.
Yes, they did. And so generally, these costs, if they change, they go up. They don't go down. We feel that $10 million is probably realistic given what we've seen with utility costs for this year. And I'm not sure if DGS has further explanation of that.
Yeah, and then any pre-COVID context, right? Because obviously COVID's a different period.
We can go back and pull the data based on previous recommendations and what's been adopted and what we had to make up out of the reserves at year end as we're asking.
I'd like to see that. Yeah.
Right, yeah, we can pull that data. We don't have it today, but the last 5 years has taught us it's a bit of a moving target. There's been just way too many fluctuations, whether it's the commodities market that Gary mentioned, COVID, and keep in mind that while we weren't occupying buildings, the buildings were still operating, so there's not that much of a glut there. But we have all of the data. We can pull that. We can show it to you several different ways, and happy to do so, and we can do it very quickly if you want to take the conversation up as a supplementals review tomorrow.
That would be great. Yeah, I
Sure.
think tomorrow would be a good time to talk about it, and because just obviously I'm in favor of telling people what actually things cost, and we did that in the CIP context in the Education Committee and trying to bake that in, but it is also a very tight budget, and there's 20 or 27 million, 20 million in utility costs recommended. If the 10 is based on historical data, obviously, again, things are going to cost more post-COVID than pre-COVID, but I think we could get some sense of it, and I would want to know, it sounds like you're saying that you think that's a fair estimate, is that right?
So the projection for FY25 is, I believe, 30 million, or excuse me, 37.
Well, the recommended amount was 37 with the additional 10, but
27 with the additional 10, so
Right.
yeah, 30, that's the 37. So it's commensurate, as Council President and T&E Committee noted, that it's commensurate with last year's FY24's delta. But prior to that, I don't know that it's 10 million each year. That would be hard to
Right.
We'll pull the data, but I don't think it's a consistent number year after year.
less, more?
Depends how far back you go. So the energy projects have been impactful in lowering the price per square foot. We're bringing on more buildings year after year, not decreasing. Our leases and triple net lease costs are impacted by this as well. When we vacated 255 Rockville Pike several years ago, it had a significant decrease in the leases NDA as well as the utilities NDA because it was an older building and we were heating and cooling it each year. So a lot of variables throughout, but we'll pull the data and identify. My recollection is that this true up at the end of the fiscal year has occurred historically. So we can certainly go back and see what those supplementals have been that have come out of the reserves year after year. And we'll do that in fairly short order.
Okay, I appreciate that. I mean, I think I appreciate the council staff's recommendation on putting the tranches on there. It's kind of tough when you don't know, without the answers of this is what we think. That's what I'm just trying to get to. Let me just say it one more time very clearly, and I'll pass the mic. Is the Department of General Services position that the expenditure for utilities next year will be $30 to $37 million, and that's why I need the funding, even though the county executive didn't request that because he thought he might not get it?
That is, if it's close to what we're spending this year with the supplemental, then I would assume that would accurately reflect what the expenditures are going to be next year. And I would also add that this 10 million true-up includes several years where there were no increases, again, partially due to COVID and partially offset by some of the streetlights efficiency improvements, but it's a little bit hard to get a baseline for what the year-over-year increase actually is, and we can try to provide some data and get that better moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. And it depends on how you view this issue, because if you view the issue from the context of what was the FY24 approved number, then it is an addition to the FY24 approved number. But if you view it on the actual projected number, which now required a supplemental because it wasn't fully funded in the budget, it's actually 1.4 million below what the actual is for a, same services or slightly below same services for a cost that we don't control, right? The cost to heat and cool buildings and to turn the lights on, it is what it is. And we have to pay the bill when it comes due. So, that is some of the moving part here. The decision that was made at the end of the last budget precipitated the supplemental appropriation to fund an expense that we can't control. If you fund it at the FY24 level, it's below same services, and we'll be in this perpetual structural challenge. If you fund it at the committee recommendation, we address the issue that was done last year and put ourselves on even footing moving forward. So that's my understanding, at least, of it. I'm getting nods from the executive branch and from council staff. So appreciate the committee recommendation on that. Speaking of the committee recommendation, Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you, and I appreciate Councilmember Jawando asking for the history and the numbers of where we were in the past. Not only was the T&E committee unanimous, but we were pretty passionate about, emphatic, about just we feel like this is just a more transparent and a truer estimate of what we're going to spend in FY25. But I just wanted to briefly mention that when we talk about the cost of the utility, so it does fluctuate, and we also are in the process of going through our Building Energy Performance Standards review, and so we did talk briefly about that in committee, that it certainly isn't going to happen in 25, but hopefully in the out years we will see a decrease in energy, but more than likely a significant cost in infrastructure and capital cost. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we will be looking at that once we commence with the BEPS discussion. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments of my colleagues on the committee, and appreciate Councilmember Jawando's questions. I think we just need to think about this in the simple terms of last year in what I would argue was an extremely difficult budget process, as all of these factors were being weighed against tax increases. The council decided to withhold the nearly $10 million from the budget, which we then knew, eyes wide open, would require a supplemental. We are now, 1 year later, going to discuss that supplemental tomorrow, and if that is the course that we want to continue going down, people have the option. But the T&E committee wants to go back to regular order and include our costs as we know them and can accurately project them to be reflected in the budget. And that's why we're recommending that this $10 million or so be added back into the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass sort of beat me to it. I was going to remind everybody of that context. There, of course, on the horizon was the possibility of a tax, well, how big of a tax increase, not whether or not there would be one. And so that factored into a number of our decisions, and this was another example of that, but I concur with the committee's recommendation. And I'll just note also, and this is a good thing, but we've been aggressive in adding new county facilities over the last 10 years in particular. We just cut the ribbon on a facility that will significantly add to the overall utility expenses in the county, but that's the cost of doing business. And the pros obviously significantly outweigh the cons. And clearly we do need to, as we always do, look for efficiencies and energy savings wherever we can. But thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other colleagues wishing to speak. We have a passionate, emphatic, unanimous committee recommendation, not to be mistaken for just a unanimous recommendation. That's like a strenuous objection and a few good men, as opposed to just the original standard objection as the regular course of order. But that passionate, emphatic committee recommendation, which is unanimous, is before the body. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. And we are now going to move away from the Transportation and Environment Committee's work for this afternoon at least, and move on to Department of General Services. Let me turn it to the GO Chair, Vice President Stewart.
Great. Thank you all. So the Government Operations Fiscal Policy reviewed the budget for the Department of General Services. You'll have in your packet, you will see that basically there were only 2 requests from the department and 1 change that needed to be made. The change that needed to be made was for the Black Rock Center for the Arts. We originally had from the county's executive's budget, $260,000 was added. However, because of the great work that we have of our delegation in Annapolis, we received $190,000, so that line item can be changed to $70,000. The only other item on their budget that got added to the new and enhanced list was for a request for a program specialist number 2 position. And I just want to spend a bit of time on this because we discussed it. This was a position that was asked for, requested last year, that was not funded. The request for this position is a full-time position to support the capital assets management systems developed by DGS. That will be deployed in FY25, and this will help us with finding out. I'm going to let DGS talk about it, actually. However, I think it is, the important point is that we've already funded CAMS. It's going to be up and running, and what we heard in Government Operations and Fiscal Policy, that if this position is not funded, then they don't have the ability to actually take advantage of the CAMS program moving forward. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Mia, but that is the only item we had left for us.
That's correct. The position would be the sole single point of contact for the CAMS system, and I can defer to DGS describe what that work would entail.
Good afternoon, everyone. Gregory Boykin, Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer for DGS. This position, and I try to think of a good analogy, if you can imagine an orchestra out there where you have a lot of experts that are playing a particular instrument, but up front you have no conductor, we would have a lot of inputs to this system, but without that person up front managing what's going in and coming out in terms of reports, you don't have a solid, viable system that's giving you the information you want. You don't have any built-in QA system or anything like that. The day it goes live, it goes from being static to dynamic. So every new building added has to have all of the components properly added to the system. Everybody who works on it has to put the appropriate information in there. If someone puts that a part costs $1, just say it's accidental, and it should have been $1,000, there has to be a QA system and an SOP system that's enforced so that we get the accurate information, so that when we run the list to say what is our capital budget and what should it look like, what components are likely to need to be replaced over the next 5 years, we have confidence, or a coefficient of confidence, that that information is correct. Without this position, you just have everyone sort of playing. And you also have things for compliance to the PM schedule. If you're doing your PMs a little too quickly, that should come up and raise a red flag. If they're taking too long, that should raise a red flag. Those things are critical to this system working, to getting the budget information that we need out of the system, and also is critical to our culture change that we're trying to do. This is the big system. It costs a lot of money. It's going to produce a lot of results for a lot of people. And it's not only a DGS system. This system will next incorporate fleet as well as fire and rescue services, and can be expanded to other departments in the government. And we've asked for the person previously so that they could be part of the implementation. And unfortunately, we couldn't get that position added now, but we're expecting to have this system live July 1st. So it's just critical to us for those reasons.
And the recommendation from the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee was unanimous, and we did suggest for the council to place a high priority on this position. As was just said, we have the system, it's going to go live July 1st, and this position is critical for that.
I don't see any colleagues wishing to speak, so with that, all those in favor of supporting the committee recommendation on this item, please raise your hand. That is unanimous for Department of General Services. We are going to move on to item 11, inflationary increase for all nonprofit partners. I just want to note on this, colleagues, this was discussed in the context of some of the budgets, since we have nonprofits that cross all departments. I will say the lion's share of it, there's a huge number in Health and Human Services, about over 75% of it. But we have always taken the approach that we are going to treat our nonprofits similarly. In the past, we have made recommendations out of committee. Sometimes they diverge, and then we try to kind of reconcile them all at the end. It seemed most appropriate to discuss them if needed during committee, but ultimately to hold off on making decisions until today and treat them all the same, to be consistent, to be fair across the board. And so I think that that is important. I did want to note we have the 3% increase from the county executive, and then there has been a request for additional increases above the county executive recommendation. I think we should have a discussion today and decide ultimately what we're going to do. I would recommend that we have the county executives recommended number at 3% as a tranche, and then as we have traditionally done, we have broken down by either a full percentage point or a half a percentage point, or oftentimes a combination if there are multiple percentages that there's an interest in including for consideration based on final budget decisions. That, for instance, if you were going to do 3%, you do 2 1% tranches, and then 2 0.5% tranches to provide us with some options in final reconciliation. So I will put that forward as part of our discussion. And before I yield to colleagues, just want to note how important our nonprofit partners are, how much we value our nonprofit partners, how in the depths of the public health emergency in particular, it was our partnership with our nonprofit sector that really helped us get through that deepest and darkest time in our community. And as we talk about the moral test of government, as we talked about the social safety net, it's the layering of the support structures with our nonprofit partners that really are at the core and at the heart of what has made Montgomery County such a great place to live and to work and to raise a family. And also is one of the reasons why we weathered the storm of the global pandemic better than most, nearly all other jurisdictions anywhere. It was really those nonprofit partners that have those deep relationships who are out there in the field each and every day. So I know that is the basis of this conversation today. It's how much we can support and lean in and double and triple down on this historic partnership that we have been fortunate to have in Montgomery County, and look forward to our discussion here today. And just note that this is related to all of the nonprofit partners across all departments and entities that we will treat consistently across the board. So with that, given that it is about 78%, I believe, of the nonprofit contracts and partnerships that we have in Health and Human Services, let me turn it over to the Chair of Health and Human Services to start the conversation, Councilmember Auernas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very, very well said. Associate myself with all of those comments and more. So I was thinking about this morning driving in. I think every single member of the council has either worked for or certainly served on the board of a nonprofit organization here in Montgomery County. So all of us are intimately familiar, not just with their work from our role as council members, but personally and professionally as well. So we absolutely extend our gratitude. So as you mentioned, this was a topic of conversation in the Health and Human Services Committee, so this is a little bit of a preview of a recommendation that you all will be receiving tomorrow, but Mr. Howard included it in the packet for discussion. So As you mentioned, Mr. Council President, 78% of the nonprofits that have contracts with Montgomery County are facilitated through the Department of Health and Human Services. And we know, and all of you I know agree, that while the 3% inflationary increase is very appreciated, it falls short of the inflationary expenses that our nonprofit organizations are incurring. And let's be honest, when we talk about inflationary expenses, we're really talking about people who, just as in county government, make up the lion's share of the operating budgets of these organizations. We recently unanimously approved a significant increase in the wage salary adjustment of county employees. And as we know, our nonprofit organizations are every bit of an extension of our county work and are important partners, not just because they help build bridges in the community, but they leverage resources and allow our county government to significantly extend our county services beyond the county's ability to do it on its own. And so we proposed in the committee, which passed 2-1, and it's relevant to this conversation. It's a chicken and an egg, but for context, because it's obviously not the full 100%, that it be done in 2 1% tranches, which just at the HHS level totals about $1.2 million, and if you included all of the nonprofits, it would be at about 1.5 and change, and the number is here. So we did this for 2 reasons. One, on the merits. As I mentioned, the expenses that our nonprofits are experiencing are outpacing their ability to address them. And that is presenting all sorts of operational challenges, forcing them to make very difficult operational decisions at a time where we know the need has never been higher and continues to grow in a number of key areas, and these organizations serve our most vulnerable populations. But the second reason that we have proposed this is that, as we all know, nonprofits reach out to us individually with very compelling cases to expand the existing contracts on a one-for-one basis of different organizations. And it is impossible for us, nor appropriate, I think, for us to necessarily pick and choose from our perspective without receiving feedback from the county executive. And so this is a way of raising all boats, acknowledging it probably falls short of the needs of certain individual organizations who have been disproportionately hit for whatever reason. But those are the 2 reasons why we propose the 2 additional tranches, which after discussion I will move for us for consideration here in our straw vote. But the final thing I'll note, and this is something that we're going to have to keep a close eye on, but the Department of Labor recently passed landmark legislation that is going to require that contracted workers be eligible for overtime hours, which on the merits is absolutely the appropriate thing to do from a policy perspective, but that will have very real financial consequences, particularly for our nonprofit sector. And so eyes wide open on that as well. With that, I yield back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So there's a motion. I just want to clarify it. So there's 3% in the county executive's budget. That 3% equates to $4,653,486. It would be moving that as a block and then an additional 2 1% each tranches. Those 1% tranches are for 1% each, which is equivalent across the enterprise to $1,551,162, combining tax supported and non-tax supported. Is that? Yep. That's the motion. Okay.
Nailed it.
So there's a motion on the floor. There's a second by Councilmember Fani Gonzalez. I see you're in the queue, Councilmember Fani Gonzalez, so let me turn to you.
I was going to say exactly. I'm going to echo every single thing that the chair of the HHS committee mentioned. And I was going to say that, to make sure that people knew that starting on July 1st, most salary workers who earn less than $844 per week will become eligible for overtime pay under the final rule, and that applies to our nonprofit partners. So very important note that the chair mentioned, and I wanted to emphasize, and the reason why I second his motion, and I'll be voting in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. See next in the queue, Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. I appreciate the motion. Had I known about it before I started reading the packet, I would have saved myself some homework because I was doing the math myself. It's just not realistic to ask our nonprofits to continue to do all the work that they do. We rely on them in many cases to do the work of the government that we're not doing. And when we look at compensation for our government employees, they're getting 7 to 12% increase, depending on where they stand in longevity and all the other potential pops. And I appreciate the looking at it in 3 different tranches, the original 3% and then 1% each tranche. So I will support this as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me turn it to Councilmember Joanda.
Couldn't agree more with Councilmember Balcom on the point she made, which is I'll just double tap and emphasize. We ask our nonprofits to do so much and augment county government, and many of us have met with them and know that they're struggling, particularly post-COVID, to hang on with costs and then obviously inflation being even more than 3%. So I think we should absolutely put these 2 on, and I'll work hard to support them to come off, because I think it's just they're getting burned out, frankly. So I think we need to put it on there. I appreciate the chair and the committee moving it forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I agree with my colleagues. We are so very, very fortunate to have the amount of nonprofit organizations that are here. And then, as was pointed out, nonprofit organizations need people to actually run them. It is so very, very necessary that they're paid fairly. And at times, it's very, very difficult work, depending on the job that they're doing for that moment. And it's unbelievable that they are able to hire people who actually want to do the work. I mean, we have to be realistic, and I think this is the fair way to attempt to correct what needs to be done. Thank you, and I will be voting for it.
Thank you. Councilmember Lukey.
Thank you. I echo everyone's comments about the skill and the vast array of our nonprofit providers that we have in the county. Not every jurisdiction can say that its government can have contracts with such a varied group of entities that can perform services. And I support keeping this discussion alive, but I'm also cautioning, again, we collectively as county government need to determine what it is that we can afford to spend, and what it is that we can afford to contract for services with outside entities. And those are fundamental questions that I think we haven't always done the best job in analyzing, particularly in light of the pandemic when it was an all hands on deck kind of approach. But we also do have to be fair to our nonprofit providers to not increase expectations and say, we want you to do more with less. That's not what we can do either. So I think collectively as county government, we need to have a firmer grasp on what it is we're contracting for with our nonprofit providers, and do so in a way that is fair and equitable in terms of the cost of the services that we are asking for them to deliver. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Sales.
Thank you. I was just going to agree that we do have a lot of tough decisions ahead of us, and we are asking our nonprofits to do a lot more work, especially when it comes to our social work, mental health, and that's across the county. And so just as we are looking at these tranches, just want everyone to keep in mind what's being impacted with each tranche that is not approved, since a lion's share of this will be directed to HHS nonprofits. Thank you.
Absolutely. 78%. It's a huge, huge number. Appreciate the work of the Health and Human Services committee specifically on this, as well as all committees, since I think every single committee has some impact, but certainly the lion's share of it is in the Health and Human Services Committee. So thank you for those thoughts. Thank you to the motion. I don't see any other colleagues wishing to speak on this motion at this point, so we will take a vote on the motion, which has been moved and seconded. That is the 3%, $4,653,486 as recommended by the county executive as an inflationary increase, and then 2 1% tranches each in the total of, or individually, $1,551,162 for each 1%. So 3 different tranches, 3%, 1%, 1%. All those in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Okay, we're going to move on to our next item, item number 12. That's the property tax options, rate, and income tax offset. Let me turn it to the GO Chair, Vice President Stewart.
Great. Thank you very much. The Government Operations Fiscal Policy Committee reviewed the ITOC. Just for people's information, the ITOC provides a tax credit to owner-occupied properties in the county. The value of the credit must be adopted by the council each year. And the ITOC is the largest tax credit expenditure currently approved by the council. And in FY23, the last year we have numbers for, about 250,000 properties qualified for the $692 ITOC, with an impact of $172.3 million in tax credit expenditures. This year, the county executive recommends an ITOC of $692 in FY25. The Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee unanimously recommends that to the full council. I do want to just note, because this gets sometimes confusing for people because the state law had changed, and now to receive the ITOC, residential property owners must have a homestead tax credit application on file with the Maryland State Department of Assessment and Taxation as of May 1st, 2023. Once the application is on file, it will automatically apply to future years. Mr. Howard, did I miss anything?
You covered it all.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just note the ITOC income tax offset credit is a manner in which county government adds progressivity to the property tax bill of residents. The lower your property value, the higher the proportionate share of the income tax offset credit is. And so it is a way to bring in some progressivity into the property tax code. We've taken the position on not raising property taxes before. This would, formalize that once again. And so we have a committee recommendation. I don't see any colleagues wishing to speak on the committee recommendations, both on the ITOC and the weighted average tax rates, both of which maintaining them at their current rates. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous, and we're going to keep it going with the Government Operations Committee recommendations. Turning it back to you, Vice President Stewart.
Great. Our next item is payments to municipalities. The Government Operations Committee met and unanimously made the following recommendations. The first was to approve the FY25 payments for to municipalities as recommended by the executive in the amount of $20,966,045. In addition to that, we had 3 other recommendations that will appear on the new and enhanced program list. One was a one-time reimbursement to the city of Rockville for police expenditures of $357,350, and an additional one-time payment to the city of Gaithersburg for the same reason, police expenditures, added to the new and enhanced list of about $347,000. I know my colleague, Councilmember Katz, will probably speak to both of those, so I won't spend much time there. The final item for the new and enhanced program list is $29,758 in a reimbursement to the town of Garrett Park for park maintenance. We discussed this in the committee meeting because when the tax duplication formula was adopted a couple of years ago, there is one item in that formula, the parks reimbursement, that is actually still needed to be worked on. There are 5 municipalities that receive reimbursements now for their parks, but what that reimbursement is based on, the formula, no one can seem to find. and we have turned the county upside down looking for it. And it was promised at the time of the agreement of the tax duplication a couple of years ago that a new formula would be worked on with the municipalities and the county exec's office. That work is still occurring. The town of Garrett Park has requested over the last 2 years for the county executive to look at their parks that they're maintaining. And unfortunately, and I'll let Mr. Hartman Espada speak to this. The county executive's office has not been able to do that in time for the budget for these last 2 years. So working with the town of Garrett Park, figuring out their expenditures, I'm asking my colleagues as for a one-time until we can rectify the situation that we provide a reimbursement to the town of $29,758,000. I should have mentioned that the overall payment to the municipalities of about $21 million is not put on the new and enhanced list because that is our agreement with the municipality. So it is only the money for the police reimbursement for Rockville and Gaithersburg and the town of Garrett Park that are on the new and enhanced programs list. And I'm sure my colleague has something to say.
From one mayor to another, turning it over to our other mayor on the council, Councilmember Katz.
Thank you. I think it should be noted that the third member of the government operations is a mayor wannabe, aren't you? Yeah.
That's probably true.
Yeah, there you go. It was well said by Vice President Stewart. The entire idea, when we first, and we can go back through this history, and nobody really probably wants us to, but the idea that we were finally able to come up with something that the municipalities could live with and the county could live with. I certainly was involved when I was wearing the other uniform as a municipal government person. But we finally did it, and then we said every 4 years we were going to relook at this formula. Well, things come up in the 4 years that we hadn't anticipated, and some of this, two of these, are that Rockville and Gaithersburg, as individual police departments, would take over what they're calling the non-priority, but really should be called the non-emergency dispatch calls from in their municipal boundaries. And even though the enhanced money was for those police departments, it allowed the Montgomery County Police officers not to, unless it's an emergency, and everybody should respond, and hopefully if it's an emergency, people from Frederick will respond, but the bottom line is that because we've allowed the other police department, the county, Rockville and Gaithersburg, other county officers can then be dispatched to other areas. As an example, Montgomery Village, Germantown, Bethesda, wherever. So this is payments for them, but it really is payments for all of Montgomery County in various forms. When the county came into the municipalities, I guess it was October, I don't know exactly when, and said, can you take over the dispatch calls? They didn't say, let's wait for the 4 years. They said, let's do it right now. And the municipalities rightly said, you're our partners, and we're going to come and we're going to do it. Now, because of the changes of these payments, the county has suggested that Gaithersburg and Rockville receive what the county would be having to pay, but in all fairness, it's not what the cities had to pay.
And I believe, and I'm also in favor of Garrett Park's addition, I believe we need to reopen this from as soon as we can, not that, and I would hope that we can do these as one-time expenses to get this to where it needs to be for the Air partners, and they're our partners. And like as an example for Garrett Park, they are doing the work of Montgomery that Montgomery County would have to do if there weren't municipalities. So I can go on and on. If anybody really wants me to do that, I don't think you do. I don't really think I want to. But bottom line is, it is fair to do it this way, and the numbers that the Vice President mentioned, to me, are the fair things to have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Lukey.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I understand the positions of our mayors emeritus up here and of the mayors of the two municipalities, Rockville and Gaithersburg, who have expressed their needs to us, and we do need to be good neighbors, and I understand why we have to do what we need to do in this moment, but I also echo Councilmember Katz's request that we take a deeper dive into this and look, because, you know, we're reaching somewhat of an incongruous result where we're providing less service and paying others for it, right? Or, you know, that we pay more and provide less service, and yet do we really? How much do we? What is the balance of the calls where those that are being exclusively handled by Rockville and Gaithersburg versus those that where we provide services such as detective work or evidence processing? So there's a lot more detail work that needs to be dealt with moving forward, and in doing so, keeping an eye on what we need to be realistic about in terms of staffing for all law enforcement departments, right? Because our municipal partners are also facing those challenges too in hiring, recruitment, and retention. So I think we need to take a big, broad look at this that's data-driven, and be mindful, too, of escalating calls for service of certain kinds that are happening within those municipalities that, again, increase their workload at the same time that they are competing for law enforcement resources. So with that, I will support what we're going to do now, and hopeful that we can come up with a more pragmatic solution that works for all parties, municipal and county, moving forward.
Thank you for that. I'll also note we have an emeritus Gaithersburg council member that we serve with as well. So we have 3 colleagues who were formerly elected in municipal leadership. So appreciate wanting to acknowledge that. And we'll just note a big part of our conversation in the committee was needing to figure out how to get through this current moment in a fair way that, you know, treats our municipal partners as the partners that they are in the provision of services that we provide to our shared constituents, but ensuring that there is a real commitment between the executive branch and the municipalities, with close collaboration and coordination with the council, to come up with a system where we avoid these added requests, where there is a formula, where there is ongoing communication, where we have the back and forth that is necessary. Everybody understands, you know, what the timing is, what the inputs are going to be, and then the output is what the output is. And, you know, as the parents here have said, as I have said to my nieces and nephews, you get what you get and you don't get upset. But we need to make sure that there is agreement on the formula, that there's agreement on the inputs. We need to make sure that the communication is happening in as collaborative and proactive a way as possible, and that there really was a significant amount of conversation during the committee on that. And I know there's a shared commitment among the executive branch and all of our municipal partners to get to that place. We're close. We're closer than we've ever been, but we're not quite there yet. And this is, you know, in some ways helping us to take that final step until we are. So I don't see any other colleagues here in the queue. We have the recommendation that is before us. All those in favor of the recommendation, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. So we are through item 13. We're going to switch back to the actual former mayor, I guess, as opposed to the wannabe mayor, apparently, which not really sure how that happened, but we'll take it. So let's pass it for one way or another. The Police Accountability Board, NDA, item number 14. Let me turn it over to you, Public Safety Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The Police Accountability Board, and I see Dr. Stoddard coming in to the table, but the Police Accountability Board, as we all remember, is the advisory entity that reviews cases heard by the Administrative Charging Committee. And they look at to determine there are any trends or concerns of note in the police. They review disciplinary cases and make recommendations to the county executive. The Public Safety Committee recommended 3-0 the approval of the county executive's recommended budget of $788,743, which is a 54% increase from FY24, which, as we know, when we did that, we didn't know what we needed because it was so new, and the state really did not give us much guidance on what we did and didn't need. And the primary funds of the addition are for the Special Legal Counsel, one for the Police Advisory Board and one for the Administrative Charging Committee, the ACC. The programs are also supported placing 2 items, the committee also supported placing 2 items on the enhanced programs list of $37,500 for trial board days, which includes a $500 per diem for each board member when they serve on a trial, and $2,000 per diem when they receive training from the Maryland Police Standards and Training Commission. There again, it's a question. We don't know for sure what the right numbers would be, but we believe that during our discussions that this was something that we should start with, and the committee has asked plans on coming back in the fall to further discuss this about the complaint data tracking system and how to ensure data accuracy between the PAB, the Police Advisory Board system, and law enforcement. You have Dr. Stoddard here and Ms. Farag, who's absolute experts on this topic. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Do you want to go through each item? I'll turn it to Ms. Farag.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. For the budget, as Councilmember Katz, Chair Katz had indicated, the big majority of this is to fund the Special Legal Counsel. That is a required item, and it had initially been on the new and enhanced programs list, but it was later identified to be a required item under county law, and that's why it's no longer on that list, but it is by far the biggest cost driver right now. And they also mentioned the per diem rates. There was some discussion at the committee whether or not 500 was an appropriate amount for per diem reimbursement. At the time, the PAB indicated that it was to ensure that people were made whole if they had jobs that they had to leave and didn't have paid leave and that type of, and those types of concerns. The estimate for the trial boards are they're estimating 25 trial boards in the next fiscal year, and that they would average about 3 days in length. That's where that figure comes from. It's an unknown. Again, it's an unknown at this point, again, because it's so new. They just took over FOP Lodge 35 from the MCPD effective last July 1st. So again, the largest part of their workload is just now moving through the system. The other pieces involved are annual salary adjustments for about $30,000. That reflects the cost of increasing compensation for the Administrative Charging Committee chair, ACC members, and the Police Accountability Board members, and that's increased under law by the Consumer Price Index, and compensation increases by 3.6%. There are also compensation adjustments for about $10,000, which is for the 2 staff persons who support the PAB and the ACC. And when I was looking through complaint data, I have concerns to ensure that the PAB and the ACC are properly resourced. They have sufficient staff to help. It's really imperative that both the community members understand and trust this system when they file their complaints against police officers, but it's also important that police officers support or trust this process. And so in order to make sure that has the best success, I wanted to make sure it was appropriately resourced. And one of the things I looked at was the number of complaints. I wanted to see if there were backlogs, how many days it took for the ACC to actually review these cases and make a determination. While I was doing that, I found that there were data disparities between what the PAB had and what at least 3 departments had, including the sheriff, MCPD, and Gaithersburg City. I emphasized this at the committee discussion. That doesn't mean anybody's doing anything wrong. It just means that they need to get on the same page as far as complaint data is concerned. And the committee's recommended that they come back in the fall with an explanation and to ensure that everybody's on the same page. And that's all I have.
Okay, great. We're going to get to a conversation on a number of these items. Let me turn it first to Councilmember Glass.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I want to thank the chair and the committee for their due diligence on this. I have just one fairly straightforward question about the role of council, which is required, but can you elaborate a little bit more about what the role of council would be with regards to these boards? Dr. Stoddard, or? Yeah.
Sure. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, also acting Executive Director of the Police Accountability Board and Administrative Charging Committee for right now. So the councils, let's talk about them two differently. So the Police Accountability Board has a council that they ask specific legal questions with regard to their roles and responsibilities.
Can we be clear that it's legal counsel?
Legal
it's
counsel.
Not this council.
Correct.
Yes.
Legal counsel. So these are
Counsel with an S, right? Exactly.
These are outside attorneys that have been brought into contract with the Office of the County Attorney. And are under a contractual relationship with OCA to represent the Police Accountability Board. There's one attorney for Police Accountability Board, one for the ACC. They're billed hourly, so it wouldn't matter if there were one or two. It's just they both receive the same rate. And the Police Accountability Board attorney provides guidance on the legal purview of the Police Accountability Board, whether they're entitled to certain information, provides guidance on accessibility of data from the board and to the board, questions around what state law says on particular issues, like things like they want to opine on consent searches, or they want to opine on various issues that are before the council, but they need their own independent attorneys to review what the state of the law is in elsewhere. For the Administrative Charging Committee, obviously it's a much more specific role, whereby they analyze law and policy and give them guidance. They actually draft if there are charging documents, they draft them in a legal form. They help them sort of work through the unfounded versus sustained charge, and so provides them specific guidance on that. Then they bill their services on a monthly basis.
Thank you for explaining that. And follow-up is who selects the council?
So actually the county attorney is the one who ultimately selects them, but that was done after a series of interviews that involved members of both the ACC for their attorney and the Police Accountability Board to provide feedback on the personality, but the rates and all those things were all negotiated with Mr. Markovs, and ultimately he had to be copacetic with anyone who was approved.
That makes sense. And I'm glad that that decision is outsourced outside of the committee, right, for an independent-minded attorney like Mr. Markovs and the county attorney to do that. Last question I have is about the per diem set at $500. And as Ms. Farag noted and is noted in the packet, it says that this per diem is to, quote, ensure no access barriers for individuals who might not have paid leave, et cetera. Fully understanding that this is the only or one of the only boards, committees, and commissions in the county that has some reimbursement to it, and recognizing the per diem rate, is it only for those who do not have paid leave? If that was the justification, is it explicitly for those individuals?
So unlike juries, which there's law that requires that they be provided leave, and they wouldn't have to take their own leave. We're essentially looking to make sure that there would be no barrier in terms of having to be able to afford to serve. We want to make sure all persons within a population would be able to serve, and recognizing that trial boards typically take consecutive days. You have to be done on consecutive. There's actually one that we've been asked by the State Police Accountability Board to staff a person on. And they said 2 days, and this is how, where the person will have to report to. And we were figuring that there's an administrative law judge who's paid a pretty significant rate, and a police officer also who serves on the trial board who receives a pretty significant rate. We thought it was only fair to have the public member receive a reasonable rate. I will also note that the council will be receiving legislation which does specifically lay out the $500 rate in it, and that would be a good opportunity if the council thought to weigh that further as part of it. And obviously what's in the budget is simply a projection of how many trial boards we expect to have to staff over the course of the year based on what we've currently seen so far, recognizing that the full year of MCPD and frankly even other agencies has not been felt yet. And so the $500 rate was largely a best guess on what we thought what a fair rate would be for someone to take off 2 consecutive days where they wouldn't be we didn't want people's access to leave to be determined on whether they got it or not.
That is the eternal debate, how we have members of our community participate in our various levels of boards, committees, and commissions, and making sure that they can fairly do so in an unburdened manner. And just what you said, that this budget allocation is in anticipation of legislation to codify it.
Correct. We had hoped to have the legislation to the council prior to the budget. We failed to do so because there are actually a few other clarification elements in it for nothing substantial that you'll see in terms of radically changing. There was some lack of clarity about the roles of the chair of the ACC relative to the Police Accountability Board, and do they have to be the same person? The ACC doesn't believe so, and actually we believe we were incorrect in interpreting the law. So there's a few corrections in there. This is included amongst that so there is a more significant opportunity to discuss the rates for the individual trial board members there too.
Thank you. I understand it. I appreciate you unpacking the rationale here. I'll say I'm not the biggest fan of prepaying for legislation in this case, but we'll have that conversation in due time. Thank you.
Councilmember Drawna.
Thank you. Appreciate the committee's work and recommendation, particularly as it relates to the discrepancies disparities between the complaint data provided by the PAB and at least 3 local law enforcement agencies. Acting Director, Acting ACAO, Stoddard, we'll get to that in a second. Could you, and I know the committee said they want to come back in the fall, which we should, which I really appreciate, but do you have any initial reasoning for that?
Yeah, so haven't dug into this as deeply as I would need to fully answer your question, but there are some things that we're concerned about. For example, the way that works is the Police Accountability Board receives the complaint and then they forward it along to the department. Does the department then count that as an incoming complaint on their records in addition to the complaints they receive, versus if we're already counting that at the Police Accountability Board, is it being double counted because it's then sent to the agency that's supposed to investigate it, and they're counting it as a separate incoming. And so the good thing is we've got each complaint that has an ID log. We have to go back and match one for one over the course of the year and say, is this being double counted because it's appearing twice in the overall counts? Okay. And so that's one thing we would speculate. The other thing is, and I talked about this in the work session, we have to also qualify what counts as a complaint. And I gave an example of, because when I was serving in this same acting role prior to when the board was first stood up, when we first stood up the online system, we had a number of, I will call them fraudulent complaints, complaining about Officer Joe Biden, amongst others. People testing out the system. It's whether we also have to understand whether some of those complaints are being counted as complaints because they're not legal. They don't meet the legal standard of they're actually not targeted towards an officer. So that's an example of who's counting what and when, and we need to figure out if we're consistently counting the same things between our municipal departments and what we receive.
Right, all right. Well, yeah, eager to hear that. I know there's also an issue in other jurisdictions. There had been some legislation to require the same amount of time for when the complaint comes into the accountability board. It has to go within a certain number of days. I can't remember what the days are, but it's a shorter period of time. It has to go to the police, the agency.
Yeah, 72 hours. It has to be,
72 hours,
yeah.
3 days, that's what I thought. But vice versa is not true. If a complaint comes through the police agency, the PA, there's no timeline set.
Well, so actually the council, in your infinite wisdom, did require that every month there be a report that says how many complaints they received. And so we know, I don't know that we know the specifics of the complaint, but we know the number of complaints and can then, understand what we're missing.
Right, yeah, so that's just something we might need to change down the line as we're looking into this, because I think there should also be congruency as part of talking together, getting things at the same time, and being able to know what's going on. You are acting now. What's the timeline? That was news to, I think, a lot of us up here in the last week or so. What's the timeline for?
I expect the position to be posted this week. Obviously, I don't have a ton of extra time in my daily world, and so I don't want to be acting any longer than is necessary. Furthermore, I think it's been important for me to keep the necessary distance between the executive and this, this legislatively mandated board and commission. So I obviously want to maintain that for public accountability and public transparency, make sure there's that separation that we've tried to maintain, and so getting that position filled is a top priority for me and for the executive.
I appreciate it. Look forward to hearing more about that as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Vice President Stewart.
Great, thank you. I wanted to go back to the per diem because I wanted to make sure I heard correctly. The $500 per diem payment for trial board members is for each day. Is that correct? Okay. And they are, and PAB members are receiving compensation for the year of, for FY25 of $11,000.
Yeah, it started at 10,000. The CPIs have increased each year, so that was the base. Yeah, that was the base, and now it's up to 11 or so.
Great. And one other question I had on the other per diem we had was $2,000 for the trial board member training. But I didn't see in the packet, how long is that training?
4 days. It's 4 days, so it's essentially the same rate.
The same rate.
Right, yeah.
And everyone must go through that training, correct?
It's absolutely required prior to serving on a trial board, which is why we need to pre-identify, pre-select, pre-train candidates. I think we're up to three or four. There's one more going through the process, so it's 3 or 4 right now that we're up to, and we'd like to have a pool of about 10 that, because obviously, for example, the statewide PAB just notified us that there's a trial in July that they have to serve on, and obviously finding people with availability in July is challenging, and so we want to make sure we have a robust selection group of people who are pre-trained that we can select from, so that we're not delaying the process by virtue of the availability of a trial board member.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Could I just follow up on that? I'm just trying to understand. So my general understanding of per diems, and you mentioned, jury duty, is that the per diem is intended to cover the incidental expenses that would be incurred, like the cost, if you're working, the cost of eating out versus being able to bring your lunch from home, some of the incidental costs, rather than doing reimbursements for all of those costs, you set a standardized rate. It's generally not used as a proxy for compensation. And in this case, $500 a day, that's, with no vacation, $130,000 a year. If you were to take 2 weeks of vacation, that's $125,000 a year. I'm just trying to understand, as was noted, we're compensating these positions, which is not entirely unique, but very rare. We don't normally compensate for positions. I just want to understand the thinking behind we're compensating for the positions because of the requirements that the positions come with, to make sure that we're offsetting the costs and fairly compensating folks for their service. And then we're also paying them for each day of their service? I'm just trying to understand, are we considering the trial and the training parts of the job to be above and beyond what's expected, and so not covered in the over $22,000 for the chair and over $10,000 for the members?
So the trial board members are not members of the Police Accountability Board or the Administrative Charging Committee. They don't receive
So this
those.
is just for the
These are
trial board members who are not compensated?
Exactly. So the trial board members are members of the public selected. One is selected by the Police Accountability Board. So actually, the Police Accountability Board has been conducting interviews of individuals who have applied to be trial board members. And they receive the per diem for the days that they serve on trials or the days that they are in training to become a trial board member. And otherwise, they are not compensated in any way by the county or the Police Accountability Board. And to get to your larger question, the reason why we're doing this is we did not, from an equity standpoint, we didn't want people who are hourly wage workers to not be able to serve on a trial board because they couldn't afford to miss the time at work in order to serve on the trial board. And so we wanted to be able to have a substitute for that that compensation, so that we were getting a full breadth of, from an equity perspective, full breadth of residents in Montgomery County to be not feeling like they're having to give up something in order to serve on a trial board.
Okay. It sounds like I was not alone among those not serving on the committee who was not clear that, who the population that the per diem was intended to cover. I think we could have a discussion of what the right rate is, but it makes more sense to now understand that it's not those who are being compensated for their positions also getting a per diem rate. That's what it sounded like in the way that it was described. It sounds like several other colleagues were under that impression as well. That's, I think, where some of the line of questioning has come from, which I have been part of, but I think you have helped to clarify it. The other question is, this is the per diem number, almost 40,000, I believe. Yeah, almost $40,000. Just wanted to check. I mean, that's based on a expectation that it might be $500. That might be the number that is used, but that's not necessarily the number that has been decided. Also, there might be 25 trials, although we don't really know if that's going to be the actual number. Just wondering if this is something that should be considered in tranches, as well. As part of reconciliation. I can't make motions from here, but would just ask that of staff and perhaps of the chair committee members as part of the conversation, whether that would be reasonable or appropriate or not, and just to put it out there as part of the conversation. But I'll turn to the public safety chair now, if that's okay with Councilmember Balcom, and then I'll turn it to Councilmember Balcom.
I'll be very fast. When we discussed it as the 37.5. It was my mistake to not be clear that this was not payment for the boards. This was payment for those outside the boards. And candidly, to put it in tranches, we don't know how many people, and maybe Dr. Stoddard wants to explain, not everybody is going to go to a trial board. Would you like to explain that?
I think we've had a total of 4 or 5 total trial boards so far, and that includes the one that has not actually occurred yet, the one in July. And there's at least one other case where there was a charging decision that is still open to solicitation of a trial board. But I think the key is the majority of MCBPD cases for the year, well, not quite a year yet, that they've been eligible. Lot 35 has been eligible for progress to the Police Accountability Board. I think the majority of the cases for this year have not actually been heard by the Administrative Charging Committee, and so we're guessing based on the number of cases that have been heard what the outstanding pool is. If we project based on what we've heard, 3 or 4, okay, well, the rest of the year is this many. It is a best guess for what we see. What I would suggest is if you're considering tranches, you would minimally want to cover the training costs up front, because obviously getting people trained, preparing for trial boards is going to be a necessary piece. But individual trial boards for the first quarter of the fiscal year minimally would be important as well, because obviously the council won't have opportunity to reconsider any supplemental at that point until the fall or early winter, in case we were running low on funds for that. Although, I mean, we could theoretically take it from another pool temporarily within the budget, knowing that we haven't spent it down. So it wouldn't be that problematic.
And
I
just to
don't
be
think.
clear, the training is required.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think the question is that being proposed on the new and enhanced program list or as part of the base budget? Because, I mean, it's a legal requirement.
So the training is required, but giving people a per diem reimbursement is not required, and that's why it's on the new and enhanced program.
Gotcha. So the training would be included in the base budget, but the per diem associated with the training days would not.
The training's provided by the state, but it's, it's
And we have no
travel.
expenses. That's fully covered by the state?
Well, the training itself is covered by the state, but travel and anything, the person has to take 4 days off consecutively from work to go to attend it, which if we do not compensate them in any way, we will be selecting from a much narrower pool of individuals who would be able to take 4 days off at that point to be able to go to the training.
And is the $500 that you're budgeting for per diem, that includes reimbursable expenses like travel to and from?
Yeah, it's not in addition to the travel costs. Yes.
Which is true of anybody who serves on a board, committee, or commission can get reimbursed expenses for, if they're traveling statewide in their official capacity on that. That's different than compensation.
Correct.
For service, which is a different standard that's only for a small group of folks who serve. Okay, thank you for those clarifications. I think they're helpful. Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. My questions have changed significantly since the last time since I pushed my button. So tell me, and I really apologize for my ignorance in this topic, but I figure I better ask than not. What is if the people going through through the training and on the trial board aren't members of the board, what is the relationship between them doing the trial, going through the trial boards? So how does that work? How does this help the police accountability board?
Yes, so essentially imagine that these individuals who are trial board members are essentially on retainer to the county. Well, I mean, essentially they've been trained. They're a list of people who are sitting there. We receive a request from the Maryland State Police about a trial board involving, let's say it was a state trooper who, whatever they were accused of occurred in Montgomery County. They want a police accountability board representative from Montgomery County to serve on those trial boards. They make a request to the Police Accountability Board in Montgomery County saying, hey, we've got a trial coming up on X date. Can you provide us a trial board member who will serve on that trial board as your representative? The staff from the Police Accountability Board would then consult their list of 10, figure out whose name is up in rotation, and basically offer, hey, July, 7th and 8th are going to be this trial board. Are you available? Yes, no. If it's no, they go to the next person down the list until they find someone who is available. They're up in rotation. Their name is offered to the state, and the state then gives them an invite to this trial board that's going to occur on the July 7th and 8th.
And then after the trial, then the member who sat in on that trial then reports back to the police advisory board, or is there what kind of?
Yeah, so it's a great question because there's nothing in state law that specifies that relationship at all. The trial board, just for, I guess, the millions watching at home, is really the last step in the process. The last step in the process before the final adjudication. And so just as a real quick, police accountability received a complaint. It goes to the department of the officer who is accused of doing wrong. They investigate. They provide a report to the Administrative Charging Committee. The Administrative Charging Committee reviews, says founded or not. If they find founded, then it goes to discipline with the chief administering discipline to the officer. The officer then decides, do I want to go to a trial board to essentially appeal this finding? If they request a trial board, the trial board is an retired administrative judge, a member of equal rank to themselves in the department, and a police accountability board representative on the trial board. That three-person panel then decides was this the right finding or not, and then they provide a conclusion that the officer wants to appeal that further, then they go into the court system to do that. And so there would be a report issued after the trial board that says the finding was correct or it wasn't, and I think that's probably the extent to which the trial board member would then be reportable to the Police Accountability Board.
Appreciate that. That really clarified a lot for me. In terms of the rate, I guess that will come back to us for a future date, and I can share my thoughts then. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Vice President Stewart.
Thank you. That makes a lot more sense. I appreciate it, Dr. Stoddard. I just want to make sure I understand, though. So in what's being added to the new and enhanced program list under the trial board member training, it just has $2,000, but isn't that per person?
Councilmember Stewart, Derek Harrigan, Office of Management and Budget. That the $2,000 is basically, let's say, 2 trial board members fall off and they no longer want to serve. So that $2,000 is for an additional 2 members to be trained up, because you have to be trained before you can.
So we already took, so this is for FY25, so we already have the folks trained up this past year.
Yes.
Yeah, we have, I think we're up to 4 now, and we've been struggling to get applicants, which is part of the reason why we want to compensate new members to actually broaden the pool of individuals that we have available to us. Because again, we just do not know with how many trial boards we're going to have, and we do not want to lose, we don't want to lose an officer, meaning we don't want an officer to have if they have appropriately sustained charges, we don't want them thrown out because we can't staff a trial board and they get off because of that failure of the bureaucracy to serve the purpose. And so we want to make sure we have enough people on board. And then we figure once we have whatever number we need to, we just need to build in sustainability over years of 2 coming off periodically. And so we're currently at, I think, 3 or 4, and we just want to make sure that we can sustain that or slightly higher than that moving forward.
Great. Well, I would say thank you for that and for clarifying. And I would like to make the motion that this just gets moved into, this $39,500 gets moved into our base budget. And we can figure out when the legislation comes over, exact amount per diem, but it sounds like this is a need we have. We want to provide per diems to people, the exact amount, and other things have to be worked out, but I think this should move off the or whatever we're calling the new and enhanced list, because we need a pot of money for this. So I would move it.
Moved by Vice President Stewart, seconded by Councilmember Katz. Is there any comment or question on this? Councilmember Glad.
So I have a procedural question, because this is the first time we're doing this. We're taking something off a list and putting it on another list, or what? So I'm confused about the process we're now engaging in. Not about the substance, but about the process.
We're a body that's built on consensus. If there is an interest in moving it from one list to another, then we can entertain those motions here. I think in order to stay consistent, the justification should be that it's a legal requirement. If that is the view, then we can move forward. But I think the motion is in order. It's a question of whether or not colleagues believe that this is an enhancement, or whether or not there is a view that it is a requirement in order to staff the trial board.
Just wanted to understand, since today's the first day and now we know what the ground rules are for the next few days about, as I've been calling it, things with an asterisk, or as Councilmember Balcom has been calling it, so now that we can formally put things with an asterisk into the base budget moving forward. Thank you. I support the motion.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. That is unanimous. Okay. Are there any other aspects of the NDA that need to be discussed?
No? Unless you wanted to speak about their compensation, but that's pretty straightforward.
Okay, I think the compensation is straightforward. It's an increase to the CPI based on the already agreed upon numbers that the body had decided. All those in favor of the NDA, raise your hand as amended. That's unanimous. Okay, we're going to move on to the police department and the FY25 operating budget and CIP discussion from the Public Safety Committee on that. Let me turn it back over to Public Safety Chair Katz and Ms. Farag for their review, and we'll call up our colleagues from the police department who I see are coming up to the table.
We have a panel coming down. Thank you, Mr. President. The county executive recommended a budget of $349.4 million, which is an increase of about 5.4% over FY24. Primarily, it's compensation increases with some technology enhancement initiatives and enhancements to act as a force multiplier and help with the police accountability and support. Savings were realized in the amount of $1,042,000 that includes records management system contract that has been terminated and the elimination of a one-time items funded in FY24. Several programs and initiatives from the county executive's recommended budget and amendments were placed on the new and enhanced program list. Contract with Axon that provides its officer safety plan, including data storage for body-worn cameras, license plate readers, and other services. The Fusus system, which is a software platform that supports the Violent Crime Information Center. The Digital Forensic Evidence Compliance, the Employee Evaluation Software, Background Investigation Software, funding for a startup of a PLAR fund program for replacement of equipment, the Cadet Program expansion, Late Night Business Safety Plan Grant Program, the Community Informed Police Training, Forensic Crime Lab accreditation. The Public Safety Committee recommended the following be placed on the new and enhanced program list. The committee put it into two tranches: the expansion of the drones as first responders in two additional areas, Montgomery Village / Gaithersburg and Germantown area, and the second tranche was Bethesda. The MPIA kiosks at district stations split into two tranches, and the workload staffing analysis study, the department currently is down about 179 sworn officers, which is about a 14% vacancy rate. The Emergency Communications Center has a shortage of 41%. Response times have increased, and overtime has significantly increased. I can turn it over to Ms. Farag and Assistant Chief Frank for any additional information. I do think it should be noted, and yes, we are very, very concerned about the numbers being so low for people who we're attracting. But I've continually to mention that Montgomery College, in private conversations, as just conversations in general, that they're saying that they have close to 550 young people in their criminal justice system, in their criminal justice program. And if we can only have half of those young people decide to come into, that will solve a lot of our issues. And I think we also need to look at, while some of the young people are in those programs and for the cadet programs, if they could become dispatchers. This is an opportunity for them to get some funding, for them to get some information, and for us to get back on track where we need to be. And with that, if Ms. Farag or Assistant Chief Farag, Ms. Farag or Assistant Chief Frank, please.
Thank you. I wanted to expand a little bit on what you were mentioning. There is, as the Public Safety Committee has been briefed multiple times, and the council is aware too, there's a lot of critical understaffing in all aspects of the police department right now. And most of the the prior budgets over the past 3 or 4 years have not really added services to police. They have addressed compensation, which is extremely important. You have to keep them at a competitive level with surrounding jurisdictions. We're in a unique position where they compete with the federal government, who doesn't have to have a balanced budget, so they can increase their police officer salaries as much as they want to, really. The county has put a $20,000 signing bonus in place, which keeps them competitive again. It has not really translated into an increase of people going into academy classes, but hopefully it has stabilized it. There's a 14% sworn vacancy rate, about an 18% civilian vacancy rate. As Chair Katz mentioned, when you look at just the call takers and the dispatchers in the 911 Emergency Communication Center, there's a 41% vacancy rate there, and that is impacting operations across the entire department. So this budget adds new this year a lot of technology initiatives, right? And you're given short staffing, you still need to deliver these public safety services. A lot of these technology projects are meant to help position the police department in a better way to help deliver those services to the community. So I did want to go through the committee recommendations on reductions because it requires a little bit of explanation. As far as records management system, it's very concerning to see that item just disappear, right? Because it's been a topic of discussion for at least 4 years. As the council discussed during the CIP process, in the Public Safety System Modernization CIP project, there is funding for a records management system. Some of this has been expended on a vendor that they brought on board a year or so ago. The vendor and the department decided to mutually terminate that contract for a variety of reasons, but that technically was not terminated until just last month. At the same time, the county executive is building their budget process to put forth their recommendations. And so they did include the $624,000, which is licensing. It's 1 year's worth of licensing for that vendor who no longer has a relationship with the county. So the committee accepted that recommendation to reduce that. That does not have an impact on the department. Additionally, the correction of the elimination of one-time items funded in FY24, this was a typo. It should have been a negative $219,000 that just reflected they're no longer funding several things from last year. So you can actually subtract double that cost to get it to the appropriate level in the budget and save $438,000. So that's a total savings of a little bit over $1 million. Again, it should not have any operational impact on the police department. Chair Katz did explain the 2 tranches. I'll explain why the Drone as First Responder program, which was initially put on as one item for $773,500. You know, as directed, I was looking for cuts and possibly tranches to help give the council different opportunities to find cuts and savings in different places as you move through this process. So the initial $773,000 is broken down for you on page 9 of the original packet. That includes annualization costs for the Silver Spring area, annualization costs for the Wheaton project, and then as you expand into Germantown, Montgomery Village, and Gaithersburg, that is $135,000 cost to add that location. And as you expand into Bethesda, that's another $135,000 cost for that location. These are contractor costs. It doesn't have to be ongoing if you don't want it to be ongoing. There was committee discussion about ensuring that the policy guidelines and guardrails that were in the original supplemental appropriation from this fiscal 24 also are placed on this appropriation, and I have included some draft language for you on Circle 57. When I went through my racial equity and community equity index analysis, I used Montgomery Planning's new Community Equity Index program, which actually divides the county into 7 different areas. You can have advantaged areas and disadvantaged areas, and you can have proportionate areas. And I was looking through and trying to compare numbers of calls for service. As Dr. Stoddard pointed out during the Public Safety Committee work session on this, a large number of the calls that they are going to are retail thefts in progress, right? That's what the drone is responding to quite often. The Bethesda area itself is listed as highly disproportionate advantaged, moderately disproportionate advantaged, and also proportionate. And it has a lower call volume for its population than much of the rest of the county. I did preliminary run through all different types of thefts and didn't see a difference. However, at the behest of the committee and Dr. Stoddard's comments, I did ask the department to look at retail theft specifically, and there's information on that data on pages circles 55 and 56. Retail thefts have increased over the past 4 years. There's no question that that's happened in the Bethesda area. So that's, I did recommend it as a cut. As an alternative, it could be placed in a separate tranche, and that's what the committee voted to do. So that's why it has been separated, most of the program in one tranche and just Bethesda in the other. for your consideration. And in terms of the MPIA program costs, this was bundled together to have 6 computer kiosks at the 6 district stations. People can come in and request their records there and get them immediately. The committee asked to better understand the different aspects of that cost, and the digitizing records cost is $76,000, and that's taking decades-old microfiche records and digitizing that for much quicker and reliable access. The committee also, I recommended to the committee adding a workload and staffing analysis and adding $250,000 to the new and enhanced programs list. The committee did accept that recommendation, and it's the only real add that the committee did for the police budget. And the discussion we had there was, I think that a comprehensive workload analysis across the entire organization would be beneficial. They've worked for several years on recruitment initiatives, and they've worked for several years on retention initiatives. But it takes 18 months from application to getting a police officer on the street. And we have an upcoming effective date of January 2025 for an enhanced pension multiplier for the police department, which seems to have slowed retirements this year and slowed entrance into the DROP, the Discontinued Service Retirement Program, possibly in anticipation of this enhanced benefit in January 2025. And my concern is that if they're slowing now, you might have a large number of police officers who retire in the next year. And so we don't have 18 months to wait anymore to recruit more people. Not saying they shouldn't, they should continue to do a lot of really innovative recruiting efforts that they're doing now. They've brought on a contractor to help, which I hope will be very promising. But now what's left is to look at the existing resources that are inside of the police department and whether or not these can be reallocated to provide patrol. Call response times are up. Overtime is up exponentially and it's going to probably go over what's budgeted for the next year as well. And so it would be helpful to know, are there too many investigators in ISB? Could any of those be deployed to patrol? And really understanding the workload analyses for all these different functions. I have been doing some research outside since the committee met, and I think that we can get an external contractor for more like $150,000 or $160,000. So if that's something that the council wants to keep on the new and enhanced program list, I do recommend reducing that amount to $160,000. The committee also requested additional information on shifting contractual security to merit positions, and the first year cost of that proposal would increase expenditures by $2.3 million in FY25 and would be considered ongoing expenses. There's more information provided for you on Circle 58. And finally, the committee recommended approval of the rest of the budget as submitted by the executive. The new and enhanced program list that was recommended by the committee is on page 3, and I'm happy to go through each of those items for you.
Do we want to go through each of the items, or do we want to begin conversation? Do you want to quickly go through each of the items, and then we'll go to conversation among colleagues?
Right. I wanted to start, and I'm going to go out of order because I think it's driving a lot of what's happening elsewhere in the budget, is the technology maintenance contract for $1.6 million, and that's toward the end. That was a county executive amendment. I think it came over on March 28th-ish. This is an Axon contract. Axon already provides a lot of the technology that the police use: body-worn cameras, tasers, drone sense for the Drone as First Responders program, evidence storage on evidence.com, which is by far one of the biggest cost drivers in the department. But this new contract, which is for 5 years, also provides a records management system, which is how we circle back to the recommended cut. It includes Axon Fusus. They bought out Fusus. My Community Request, which is a survey and feedback platform that's actually required by County Bill 4520 to annually survey officers as well as community members who have contact with the police. Axon Standards provides early Internal Affairs Division and early intervention services, and a redaction assistant, which helps with the MPIA requests for body-worn camera footage. Having these existing licenses will allow the police department to really expand their ability to use technology to provide public safety services. The Axon Fusus is one to note because there's also a line item in here to add the Fusus platform for $160,000. Actually, and I should change that, it's not ongoing, that's supposed to be implementation costs. Again, it was another crossover on the budget. Since they now have the license, they're using the $160,000 here to actually implement. And Fusus is something the council might be really interested in because it provides a voluntary connection to people who want to engage and allow the police officers to monitor their external video cameras. So houses of worship, for example, who have suffered through, increased burglaries and vandalism and bias incidents and threats, might want to partner with the police department with this platform. And the best produced public safety, in my opinion, is co-produced public safety, both with the public and the police department, and that does allow the opportunity for that to occur. In terms of the late night safety business grant program, that's $100,000. That is subject to the availability of funds. It is unknown how much they will actually want to reimburse to people who apply. The hookah lounge legislation might reduce the number of people who apply for that, and it's not known right at this point, what the application process is going to look like. The mandated Public Safety Training Academy, training in accordance with Bill 1721. After talking to the council member's office over the weekend and further reflection on this really should not be on the new and enhanced programs list because this is legally required by county law. So I would recommend moving that $40,000 into the base. The NeoGov employee evaluation software platform for $36,000. Again, this provides evaluation. It will help make things more uniform and equitable across the entire department as they perform this process. The eSoft background investigation software, same kind of thing. It's just going to be a force multiplier, help them go through the background investigation process, bringing people on more quickly. Forensic Crime Lab accreditation, they're required to do this every year, and this reflects the actual costs of doing that. Additional funding for the police cadet program. This came over as an amendment too for $495,000. Currently, they work for 20 hours a week, only during the school year, and they're getting paid $20.22 an hour. This expansion would provide cadets with an increase to $24.54 an hour. It would also make the program full-time, and it would also provide some benefits. It would provide it year-round. Instead of not just during the school year. It would create an equipment planned life cycle replacement PLR fund for $500,000. That is meant to provide a uniform replacement of out of service life materials, and this one includes AEDs, 3 motorcycles, the citation printers in vehicles, and some drone equipment. There's a fuller list on page 9. The drone equipment is not associated with the drone as first responder. This is part of their regular drone program, and that's it. We've covered the other pieces, so if you have any questions.
Yeah,
please let
before
me
we get into the lab accreditation, could you just explain why that's not legally required? Or what the determination would be?
You think it's legal? Okay. They couldn't function if you didn't do it.
Well, that seems pretty,
Yes.
pretty clear.
So, yes.
Can we hear from the department?
Darren Frank, Assistant Chief, Montgomery County Police. Yes, so there's not a per se law, but we wouldn't be able to testify if we lost our accreditation. All our work in our crime lab would be for naught. So while there's not an actual law, it's an accreditation that we do need.
I think that falls under the same category. So we'll take those up as potential amendments to the committee recommendations. See where colleagues are. You mentioned the $40,000 that you believe should have been, and then this lab accreditation. So we'll take that up. So we'll have colleagues get into the queue. I'll just start off say first of all, thank you to the Public Safety Committee for a tremendous job. For all of your work. Thank you to the department and to council staff, Ms. Farag, for all of your significant efforts. We know that it is a challenging time for the department. Ours here in Montgomery County, we have a great police department I'm very proud of. I know all of us are very grateful for the work each and every day. Not easy right now with recruitment and retention challenges. We have talked a lot about it. The committee has talked exhaustively about it. We are here, ready, willing, and able to do what we can to support. And so, thank you for all those works. I'll just, my one point here before turning to colleagues on the Drone as First Responder program, I think this conversation has been focused during the budget differently than the conversation that has happened in the public and in the moving forward with this, and even in actually the committee memo, which I thought was very helpful to us, which viewed the Drone as First Responder program in the communities where it is currently deployed as a benefit to the entire department in a way to support and help to do public safety more efficiently, more effectively, to help deploy resources in a much more effective way. And so, the way that I have viewed it as someone who strongly supported it being deployed in Wheaton and in Silver Spring to see how it worked was not exclusively to support the communities of Wheaton and Silver Spring, although of course it does and it has, but it is on the net benefit to take away the strain from a department that is struggling. As we talked about, how do you redeploy more folks to patrol because we don't have enough patrol? Well, one way to do that is to expand the Drone as First Responder program. So I personally think that treating the expansion in that regard as opposed to picking communities amongst each other and deciding whether the retail thefts in Bethesda are a higher priority than the up-county needs in Germantown, Gaithersburg, and Montgomery Village. I think that there are huge strains on the police department. This is a very effective way that we have deployed a pilot program successfully. The department has done a terrific job. We have the governor's seal of approval now for this program, and either treating the annualization of the pilot and the additions as one tranche, or separating the annualizations and then the addition, the two additional, the expansion of the program effectively into two separate tranches, but not pitting the communities against each other, I think would be much more in line with the way that this program has been shared with the public and actually what its actual effectiveness is on the ground, and the net benefit to the department in deploying technology to better support the needs that we have, the challenges the department faces. So I can't make a motion, but I'll just put that out there to colleagues as part of the conversation. I think that would be very much in keeping with the committee conversation and in the way in which the committee shared the support of the expansion broadly of the Drone as First Responder program and why it's been so effective and how it has helped us to address these acute needs that the department is still working on. And so I would put that out, if it was one tranche at $773,500 or two tranches, which I believe would be $502,640 for the annualization and $278,860 for the two new ones, if you include the $70,000 in the annualization for the $70,000 for the additional drone, which I assumed was for the expansion.
I'll make the motion. Are those numbers correct that you just said?
I can do the math to ensure they're correct. I understand the underlying is to have the annualization of the two existing sites in one tranche and the expansion in the other. The $70,000, the additional drone technology, or the additional drone is required and should stay with the annualization piece.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's $502,640 would be $432,640 plus 70 for the new drone. So that's that tranche for the annualization of the pilot program would be $502,640, and then the two new areas of expansion would be a total of $278,860. And if you add those two numbers up, it would be the total amount of $773,500.
Okay.
I so move.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table on that. If colleagues want to discuss this particular motion, stay in the queue. If you don't, if you could hop out of the queue, we'll discuss this motion, and then we can go on to the rest of the budget. It was moved by Councilmember Katz and seconded by Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez. Okay, I'm going to turn to Councilmember Joanda.
I've been in the queue for half an hour to talk about other stuff. So, but now that we're doing this, I guess I'll get back in the queue.
I'll put you first in the queue when we start over. Councilmember Fani Gonzalez.
Yes, I would just say that as you all know, Wheaton is one of the sites that started this program, and before we kicked it off, I had a community conversation about it, and I had over 100 people who came to that town hall, and it was amazing. We have business owners, we have residents, we have students. Everybody was in agreement after listening to the conversation. And by the way, it was a bilingual town hall. I had a section in Spanish with police officers who spoke Spanish explaining the whole program to people, and another section in English. And I will tell you, everybody was in agreement that this drone was a tool to help our police officers. And I'm actually pleased that we are moving, if everybody agrees, right, move forward of expanding this to other parts of the area. And I do agree with the motion of having Montgomery Village, Gettysburg, Germantown, and Bethesda in one trench, because we shouldn't be dividing communities, as the council president stated. And then I will take the opportunity and just add, and I will be out of your way, to say that, when we talk about recruitment, and Ms. Farag, you have been amazing. I'm not in the public safety committee, but you have been outstanding, answering so many questions that come from my office. And I know we keep bugging you, Jose Ortiz especially. Gotta love him. I just want to say that, anything that deals with criminal justice comes from the state. And I cannot help myself to say it. As you all know, I went to Annapolis with mothers who have kids who die with fentanyl, right? I went with business owners who keep getting robbed by kids who are high on fentanyl. And to change those laws to ensure that we criminalize the distribution, I'm talking about criminals bringing drugs to our county. I'm not talking about users sharing drugs. That's different. It's so important. If we really, really want to push for recruitment and having the very best people apply to our police department, then we need to be responsible in passing laws that really will help our police officers do their job. Avoiding the conversation on criminalizing, having a stronger penalties on fentanyl distribution is wrong. It's going to come back to the General Assembly this upcoming session, and I'm going to go back again to testify in favor. That's what it means when we say that we're supporting our police officers and making sure that Montgomery County continues to be a great place to work for our police department. So that's all I'm going to say, and I agree with the rest of the committee recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mink.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple thoughts on this. Appreciate the conversation and want to again, speak to my appreciation for the whole process that has gone into the rollout of the drones program with the additional interaction with the public and increased transparency, the guardrails that were added to the appropriation last time around and that we are adding to the budget lines this time around, and appreciation to Vice President Stewart for her work on that in her office. As part and parcel with it, I want to also mention that, we talked about this as a pilot and about the importance of coming back as part of that pilot to bring it full circle, to look at, analyze the data in terms of, what we have seen, what's good about it, what concerns the community might have, where we're saving on staffing, all of the, different pieces that we talked about as the benefits of this rollout. And we have not had the opportunity to really formally do that. It hasn't even, we haven't had the full year to be able to do that year over year analysis. We do have some piecemeal data that's coming through. We have some positive results that are coming through, but we have not actually done kind of what you would do at the completion of a pilot to be able to analyze that data. And I think that we can make some guesses as to the outcome there, but I think that the rollout has been so positive, and I want to make sure as much as is possible that we see that through for the public and that we demonstrate that we are going to be true to what we kind of planned from the start, to be able to look at that data and expand. At the same time, I know that there is a balance with very real staffing issues on the ground, and so I was, having heard the conversation from colleagues as well, prepared to still support the expansion of this program by at least one of the drones as kind of a compromise here, and then wanted to hear the conversation around the second drones as well. So that's why I was glad that we split it into the 2 tranches so that we could consider all of the pieces of this as we move forward and as we also look at balancing the budget. I also don't want to divide communities here, and I can understand, the awkwardness at that. With that, I think that this is also just a budget conversation. The 2 tranches are representing 2 different investments, and so that I think that it's appropriate to look at that piece as 2 separate budgetary considerations as well. So that's kind of my thought on that. I mean, I think that if we were really going to go by the book as to the conversation that we had with the public initially, to Ms. Frog's point as how this could be labeled as one-time or ongoing, either way, I would think that it would be appropriate and understandable to call this a one-time expense and then come back in next year, do the annualization. I don't think that's a huge deal as long as we can stay true to the conversation that we had with the public before, that we are going to come back and analyze the data and continue to think about what we want to do in the future based on that data and based on the conversation that we have with the public at that moment. So those are all of my different thoughts there. I would be more comfortable keeping it in 2 tranches and keeping the conversation open at least as a budgetary one as we move forward. But appreciate the conversation, and I will yield.
Thank you. Councilmember Glah.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts as the district council member from District 1, and then Councilmember Katz picking up on those thoughts and channeling them into the motion, which I fully support. And the reason I support it is because I appreciate the data that MCPD has provided us on this, that in the 5 months from November through March that this program has been up and operating, there have been 454 calls for service. 123 officers have been freed up. The average response time is 1 minute. And in 53 of those calls, the drone alleviated the need for an officer to be dispatched. If the goal is to make our community safer and allow our officers the time and ability to respond to other situations or limit interactions, both notable goals, this does both. And for that reason, I support combining these tranches, and I have a technical question on the motion. On page 2 in the packet, it says tranche 1 and tranche 2. Are we simply combining those 2 for that $773,000 item? Okay, can we restate what the motion is?
Sure. They moved to split it still into 2 tranches, but they're different tranches. One is just the existing sites with Silver Spring and Wheaton, plus the $70,000 they need for an additional drone in one tranche. And then the other tranche is the Montgomery Village, Germantown, Gaithersburg DFR site, as well as the Bethesda DFR site.
Very good. Thank you. Different approach, same goal. I want to make sure that if the program expands, which I will fully support, that we expand it to those different locations at that same time, because the data shows it's working. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Councilmember Bauckham.
Thank you. Yes, I'm all in on the drone program. I think it's been fantastic, and I think that we need to expand it. I'm really looking forward to working with the police in expansion in my area. I do want to just mention, the preliminary data looks great, and I'm glad that we have that data, and it certainly looks good. But that doesn't replace to come back after a year and have a formal review of a pilot program and looking at specifically what are the lessons learned. And I think that we just need to have that discipline and make sure that we do have that. And I also think that when we go to Gaithersburg, and it's most likely it will be in Gaithersburg, but the beauty of the area that it will cover Germantown, it will cover Montgomery Village, that when we work with the community, as both of my colleagues here did when it came to their districts, that we have some data that we can share those lessons learned with the community, and to give them the advantage of the lessons learned. So I really appreciate it, and thank you for pulling out the 2 tranches. That makes more sense. I didn't want the Germantown Gaithersburg and with a huge big number next to it, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sounds good. Councilmember Lukey.
Thank you. I think I'm the last district council member to go who's affected by the motion, and certainly I'm going to support the motion. And as we noted, and keeping the expansion sites grouped together as opposed to separated, as we noted at the committee work session on this, Bethesda is a more urban district, which of course makes the abilities of the drone more helpful in certain respects because of the highly urban type area that it would be flying in and assisting. And so I certainly appreciate that. While the calls for service and the types of calls may be different than the proposed up-county expansion site, there's high utility in both areas and to our officers. And I do want to say that one of the things for people to be aware of at the time that all of the Drone as First Responder pilot program, as we call it, was starting, was residents in my district saying, how come it's only down county? How come they're not doing it up here? And how quickly can we get it too? Why weren't we considered, right? And so I understand that certainly there was an issue with residents down county needing a little more convincing or discussion on that, and that's okay. But also we, know our constituents in districts 2, 7, and 3, and they were eager to go. And that's what spurred my letter to the county executive, along with council members Balcom and Katz, to request that in the county executive's budget this year. And I do want to give a hearty thanks to Commander Stancliffe and the folks at 6D for the outstanding efforts they have made to assist in and around Montgomery Village. This has not been easy by any stretch, but it's good to hear in terms of the positive collaboration between the officers and the folks, for example, at Cider Mill, who said, and I was there on site, where they gave thanks to the officers for being present, for being as engaged as they are, and for listening to the residents who just want to feel safe in their own community. And while we aren't doing anything specifically related to fentanyl today, I want to thank my colleague for reminding everyone of the importance of that issue. And certainly I will, again, if the state pushes forward on that, I will support that again next year as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just had a question about, while I agree with all of the changes to the tranches for the budget recommendation, I had a question about the RESJ score. I wanted to know if the department is working with the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice to improve the score.
I can just try to paraphrase what Chief Jones said, and my apologies if I get it wrong, during the Public Safety Committee meeting. One of the things that's missing is the core team, and they're going through some different staffing at this point. He did mention that he would reach out, however, since he's close to retirement at this point. That may be a move for a new chief to do after budget's over. So.
Okay. Yes, so I'm sure that will be part of the discussion when we speak with the new candidate. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, motion on the floor. It's been moved by Councilmember Katz, seconded by Councilmember Fontaine Gonzalez. All those in favor of the splitting of the tranches, please indicate by raising your hand. That is 9. All those opposed, that is 2. It is approved. 9 to 2, that'll be 502, 640, and one tranche for annualization and 270, 860 for the expansion to the 2 new areas. With that, let me turn it back to Councilmember Giwando for the rest of the department budget. And I'll just note there were 2 items raised by staff, which we can take up at the end. Welcome to talk about them, but I'll entertain motions on the $40,500.
Actually got 3.
Oh, 3. I'll turn it to staff at that time, and we can go through those. So to avoid, multiple people wanting to bring that up, I just want to note I'll entertain motions at the end of the conversation for that. Councilmember Giwando.
Sounds good. Yeah, so I was going to make a motion because on the 40,000, and I'll explain that, but I will not, so that you can.
Yeah, I just think we could do them together. It's easiest.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Appreciate the discussion, and I'll talk about that first. So the 40,000 that Ms. Farag mentioned was the training associated with the Community Informed Police Training Act, which is Bill 1721 that I introduced with colleagues, and that covers the cost of the 30 hours of training for new recruits at the end of their training at the academy. And Montgomery College was mentioned. That's been the main partner. They have, and when we introduced this bill with Dr. Pollard, actually, that's how long ago we introduced this bill, and we did it at Montgomery College, we talked about at that time it was closer to 700 students studying criminal justice, but it varies between 550 and just under 700 year to year. Not all want to be in law enforcement. Some want to do other things. Some want to go to law school and do other things and be attorneys. But I do think that, one, it's bill mandated, so we should include it, obviously. 2, it is really tied to this idea of recruiting and training the next generation of law enforcement. And that even if, I was really happy to hear Councilmember Katz say that, if we just got a couple of, I've been saying that since 2021. Like, imagine if we just scraped the surface of Montgomery College, where, by the way, the only community college in the country that's a predominantly Black institution, a predominantly Hispanic institution, a predominantly AAPI institution, as far as like Hispanic serving, not predominantly. It has multiple designations. 75% of the folks in these programs are from Montgomery County, are people of color that reflect our diversity and life experience here. So I think it is a great opportunity to help impact those numbers. And I really appreciate Assistant Chief Frank and his team for working with Montgomery College. And just wanted to ask a question on that. Is this enough? The packet mentions that the funding, even this funding, could fall short of the program cost based on the recruitment classes you have coming in. Could you just talk about that?
So this is an estimation based on what we've seen, based on our history so far with filling classes. We obviously want to exceed this number, and everything we're doing is aimed at that goal. And if we exceed it by 25, then we'll either ask for an appropriation, supplemental appropriation, or whatever we need to do. That'd be a great problem to have. But we think this is a fair number to start at for right now.
Okay, I appreciate that. And just really excited that this moves forward, and I really appreciate council staff's recommendation that this should be base budget since it's law required. I also wanted to mention on the vacancy issue and on the recruitment issue, we had a joint PHP public safety meeting last week. I think it was last week, where we took up the Parks Police budget. And we talked with Chief McSwain, who had seen a dramatic decrease in vacancies in 1 year from budget to budget. And we talked with him a little bit about some of the things that they implemented to help with that in the midst of the nationwide challenge with recruiting and retaining folks. If you hadn't seen that, I think we had talked about making sure those learnings kind of transferred. Obviously, he grew up in MCPD, and I asked a couple questions around are they doing the same things that you're doing? And he said, well, not all the way. So it seems like there might be some learnings. Obviously, they're smaller, but I do think the numbers that they went down as far as closing vacancies were pretty incredible. And there were a couple specific things they pointed to around how they structure their schedules and other things that they're doing that the department may or may not be doing. I just wanted to say that to you while you're here. So I think it warrants conversation. I know the joint committee talked about, the Public Safety Committee said they wanted to come back to that, and I hope that you do. The other thing I'll say, I do want to say more about the ResJ. It is concerning that the department, this is the Racial Equity and Social Justice score, was the budget tool that has been happening for a couple of years now. It was given a 3 out of 11 by the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. And the core team was cited. Again, that's the team that's supposed to be in the department driving the work of racial equity across the department, that team hasn't even formed. And we passed that law. It was one of the first bills we passed in 2019. I just think there's no excuse for that. And I can't imagine, and it kind of coincided not only with me coming on the council, but also with Chief Jones coming in. And it's hard to say we're demonstrating a commitment to racial equity when the core thing to form a team to focus on it in 5 years just hasn't even been formed. And it's disappointing. It also talks about that there's silos within the department. There might be good goals, but that the response didn't indicate a convergence of those across the department and demographic groups. I bring this up, and I would love for you to respond if you have anything to add, because I think it's critical to our recruitment and retention efforts. You know, if we're going to recruit these young people at Montgomery College, many of whom I've spoken to, or keep the people on board that we brought on that are the people we want, I think we have to show in every way possible that we have a commitment to this work. So I just wanted to allow you to, if you have anything to share, Assistant Chief Frank, since you're here today.
So I would agree. We need to stand that program up and meet our obligation. These last few years we've been standing up and meeting a lot of obligations and working very hard on this issue through reimagining, through a number of different issues. I would, regarding recruiting and retention, I would point to our most recent classes, which has been noted by the council and by the county executive, of the extraordinary diversity which we've hired the last 2 classes. I didn't bring those stats with me today, but I want to say there's something like a diversity ratio of 76%. So we are recruiting from not only a very diverse population, but Montgomery County residents. But we want to improve on that and make sure that we don't lose anyone, just as you said with the adjustments that Park Police has made in their hiring. We don't want to leave anything on the table, and I'm sure the Chief Jones is in discussions, and certainly he's going to hand over the reins to someone else. And when that occurs, I'm quite sure that the conversation will continue.
I appreciate that, and I think we're driving towards the same goal here, and I did notice those numbers in the class, and that's a good thing. But I think keeping them up and getting them higher and keeping people on board during is going to be a big part of that. The last thing I'll mention, I won't make the motion, but it sounds like we're coming back to that. On the workload and staffing analysis survey, appreciate council staff mentioning the 160,000 or the 150,000, it could be reduced.
Right.
That was added as a new and enhanced?
Yes, that was my recommendation.
And you're recommending one of the recommendations is to lower the amount?
Yes.
Okay, got it. I'll just say now, I think I will support that motion. I think it's critical, and hopefully what I'm talking about with what's going on at Parks could be a part, all that learnings from that could be a part of that. And it was mentioned, I watched the tape that Councilmember Mink mentioned that OLO could potentially be connected to this or involved in that some way. I think that would be a good idea, just as a suggestion.
That was for sheriff, I think.
No, it's for this, I think. Yeah.
I think I'll only mention my concern is that I'm looking at the January 2025 as kind of the critical mass date when people might leave. And I do know that external consultants who do this work can do it in about 14 to 16 weeks.
So you're worried about speed is what you're talking about.
I am, and it's different, I don't, because I worship OLO, I really do, because I would love, I'd love to do that kind of work too. But I think that it's so intensively subject matter tied, the workload analysis for investigators. How much of your patrol time do you want free to be able to do community policing? How do you build that in? How do you mine the data? Are there any problems with the underlying data? Because, how do we know if we have a certain number of police available? Or are they on calls? Are they at lunch? Are they on leave? That type of thing. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
And that's my only real concern there. I mean,
Well, even if they could be a part of the team,
Yeah.
I mean, again, I just think, given the ResJet, just giving a different lens to be a collaborative part of that team, even with the consultant. Assistant Chief Frank, were you going to say something?
So two things. I've been involved with workload analysis now for, 15 years now. We have a system to do patrol staffing workload analysis. We're using that right now. If council would like to continue with the recommendation, and again, I have the highest respect for Ms. Farag and especially her care for this department. The one area that if you want to consider would be in our investigative services, because that's a much more difficult animal to look at. And what you'll see in the literature is that there has been success at times in doing that analysis, but other times not. And part of it is making sure that you get the absolute best professionals in there. I think very highly of OLO additionally, but I think this would be a big lift for them to become experts in what they would need to become experts for to do the analysis on things outside of patrol. So if you are to continue, I would, and certainly we could get their lens on it. I agree with that, Council. The more eyes, the better. But if you were going to proceed down this avenue for things outside of patrol, then I would certainly make sure that we get the best of the best to do it.
I appreciate that. Last point, the records management, I'm sad to see that go, as you know, because it's sad and happy. Happy that we're getting rid of a contract that didn't do what you said what they were going to do. Sad that it's going to take longer for us to get it going, because it's so critical to many of the bills, the things you've been asked to do, and the work we're trying to do, and the equity work. Every time I see you, I'm going to ask you any update on timeline with that.
So we're working through the procurement issues to make sure that we get it absolutely right, because we do not want to have an error there. I will say that we have an opportunity that is going to save this county a great deal of money, and in addition to that, it will help when this program is implemented. I've already heard successes in other agencies that the morale of officers around it. Report writing is a big deal, and the avenue that we're looking at going down now is very, very good in that respect. So, as I said when we first ran into this, there is some big silver lining to this cloud. It's unfortunate, I agree, but I think we are going to be much, much stronger when this does get implemented, and it is the highest priority for my technology director. She is quite aware that the clock is ticking.
And council staff is recommending, could you just talk about your recommendation in the context of this new system? I thought I saw you said not approving an increase because there was some money in the public safety modernization project. Or could you just talk about the relationship?
Yes, so I recommended the $624,000 reduction because that's licensing fees tied to a vendor who no longer exists. In terms of implementation, there's about $500,000 in the public safety system modernization budget still that's unencumbered that could be used for the implementation. Some implementation work has been done as far as interfacing with the state that can still be used, according to my TEBS folks who I've discussed this with. And so there is funding there. It's not leaving them in the lurch at this point.
Okay. Thank you. I would concur with that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Let me turn it to Councilmember Lukey.
Thank you, Mr. President. All right, I have a question about the two MPIA items. Because, and my colleague on public safety and I were over here trying to reconcile it. We may be misremembering, but what we were remembering is different than what's on the list, which was we had a discussion about the kiosks and the printers, and was that really where people would go if they're making an MPIA request, and so on and so forth. And things that are readily available, that are on a website, that are responsive to public records, people can print from libraries, et cetera, right? So there were other publicly available locations for that. But what couldn't be done in an alternate way was the records digitization.
Right.
And we also weren't sure if we had the numbers in the right spots too. So can you just reconfirm how much the MPIA digitization of records cost is?
Well, I thought it was the 76,000.
It is the 76,000. Okay, so that's, those two match. I would like to move that we put the digitization in tranche 1 and move the kiosks and computer printers to tranche 2. Because there isn't an alternative to the digitization of the records to make them easier to respond to MPIA requests, but there are alternatives for places you can print documents responsive to the MPIA, like libraries, for example.
Okay, it's broken down that way? You just want to flip the order?
Yes, I wanted to flip it so that the digitization was in tranche 1 and the
Gotcha.
kiosks were in tranche 2.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have a second for that? Council. Wait. Okay, sorry. Okay, so Councilmember Lukey moved to switch the tranches between the digitization and the kiosk. Councilmember Katz seconded. Councilmember Glass.
I appreciate the thoughtfulness of the recommendation, but I just have a bigger question of whether that is a change, a distinction without a difference, really, because we're not tiering them per se, right? Aside from what we did with park and planning, nothing else is tiered. So whether it's tranche 1 or tranche 2 or item 1 or item 2, I don't know if it gives preference to either, unless there's some subtext there that is what the committee is recommending.
I guess I can say it this way. I strongly recommend we get behind digitizing records for sake of MPIA responses, because MPIA responses are cumbersome. They take a lot of time. And also it assists us when we request information that they would be able to call up via the digitized records that are now existing on microfiche. There you go.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, just to clarify, so with park and planning, as is traditional, because we basically provide them a bulk sum amount of money and give them guidance on their work program, we have historically, even before there was ever any indication of prioritization on any version of reconciliation, we have tiered based on their input and the committee and the council's ultimate thought. Other than that, we have a list, and from that list, we determine what has the greatest level of support within the finite resources that we have at the end of the day. So it's guidance. I mean, even with park and planning, the tiers are guidance. It's not like you can't support one until you support the other. It's traditionally what has happened is that has helped colleagues to understand what is the priority, to understand, based on how much funding was available, what you were willing to support based on other priorities. But there is no distinction in the ultimate list between where something is tranched. It's the amount that is tranched and the item and whether or not there's ultimately support for it. So really the main questions for the police department budget for all executive departments are what are the what is on the list, whether you want to remove things from the list, whether there are things like we're going to take up with the staff recommendations that need to be clarified of whether or not they're contractual obligations or legal requirements or things that really shouldn't be discretionary decisions, and then ultimately whether or not things would be tranched in different ways for the decision point, either broken down or added together in different ways for the purposes of discussion. But we're not prioritizing here what we prefer to put ahead of others, because there's going to be a much broader context, with all of the elements of, what we fund and what we don't fund. Does that clarify at all?
Sort of, but I just wanted to say, I think it's really important that given the time cost associated with responding to MPIA requests, that we do the thing that facilitates the response to the request on behalf of the department. That's all.
Wholeheartedly agree. Wholeheartedly agree.
Can I ask
just
a clarifying
clarifying
question
for the
about,
motion. Yeah,
about
please,
this?
Please.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're getting to take advantage of all the work that all the different committees are doing, this one included, but as well as other ones, the whole tier 1, tier tranche 1. Okay. If a committee wants to tell us that something is more important than something else, I want to make sure that I receive that information, and I also want to make sure that we can convey it. And I'm thinking of sessions, not to get too off track, but other sessions that we've had in other committees where we said, Tranche 1 and Tranche 2 maybe for the same program, but they were different amounts, and the larger one is Tranche 1 because it includes setup costs, for example. So you can't pick Tranche 2. And we didn't call them Tier 1, Tier 2. We just said, these are the 2 tranches. Council staff, can you please make sure you indicate that people got to pick this one first, because if you pick the second one, the program's actually not going to happen. And I think that those are indicated as Tranche 1, Tranche 2. So I think that is happening in some places. I can go check in a moment. This one, I think, similarly process-wise, makes sense to have a Tier 1, Tier 2 ordering, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to be like, here's a great other way to go order up your MPIA request. It's still going to take us forever to find it. Like, the whole point is to bring these pieces together to support and expedite moving the requests towards completion, and one of them is essential to even kind of starting that.
So if the view is, I hear you. If the view, just to clarify, so I understand and so that others understand. So if the view is, in order for the second piece of it to be cost effective or to make any sense, you really need to fund the first one first, then tranching it as the same item, Tranche 1, Tranche 2, that would make sense. And that would be helpful.
That's my understanding.
So if that is the rationale, then we should entertain that.
That was the rationale, and the rationale for reordering the way they appear, to
Got it.
signal how, in what order they must be done if they are done. Yeah.
Okay, so, do you want to restate the motion in that context specifically, and then we can take that up and colleagues can, I see 2 colleagues in the queue. Are you in the queue for this one? So I'm going to...
You ready for it? Okay. As noted on the FY25 committee recommended new and enhanced program list, I move to adjust the Maryland PIA digitization records cost from Tranche 2 to Tranche 1, and the MPIA program cost to provide computer printer kiosks at district stations from Tranche 1 to Tranche 2.
And I second that, just like a Dr. Seuss novel, Tranche 1 and Tranche 2.
Okay, so that has been moved by Councilmember Lukey. It's been seconded by Councilmember Katz. Do you have any other comments on that, or let me turn it to Councilmember Glass, who's in the queue here.
So thank you for explaining that, and I just want to say, though, since we've engaged in that and it has become clear that some committees are operating that way, and we've been operating a slightly different way throughout today, I just want to put out there for committee chairs that when we do our report outs, if there are tranches or tiers or whatever term we want to use, we need to be mindful of this new system, myself included, moving forward, because if that's the way people have been operating, that's the way we got to do it.
Yeah, I think the purpose of I just want to make sure that I'm clear. The purpose of this isn't to tier different things that are being added to the new and enhanced program list to determine what is going to be funded. Ultimately, the will of the body is going to decide that. However, if there are items where they are related items where one element of funding is needed for the second element, it would be imprudent to fund a second element of funding, even if it was a lesser amount, because that would be budgetarily more advantageous perhaps if the first funding was not provided, which is essentially necessary for the second item. So in that spirit, that would be helpful for all of the readouts from the committees to make that clear, and also for us to make sure that we're fully on the same page. I will also note that we are making a concerted effort to make sure that everything that is on the list, that there is a full understanding of each item on that list. Staff is going to be available to chiefs to go through that, so that those committee members and those staff members of committee members who perhaps weren't in the committee discussions would have the benefit of the background of those committee conversations, which will provide even more context into many of these items, because ultimately the committee chairs do a great job and committee members do a great job of explaining the nature of the conversations and summarizing. Not everything can be included as part of that, and so we're going to make sure as we move forward over the next 2 weeks that is as clear as it possibly can be, so that we have all the information before us to answer the questions. Councilmember May.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think that sums it up nicely. And just to double down, the tranches are for when you have a single program that's being split into multiple pieces and there's an order in which they need to be funded. And tiers are a committee's indication of, like its parks had to do with a large amount of funding that they're working with, overall priorities of the committee within that department.
Agency in that case, but yes.
Agency, yes,
you
thank
got
you.
it, which is related to an outside agency, which is traditionally how we've done it for years, if not decades, in terms of MNC PPC. Okay, there is a motion, there is a second of the motion. All those in favor of the tranching of this item in the way as indicated, that is unanimous. Thank you for the discussion and the clarification. I apologize for my misunderstanding at first. Let me turn it over to Council Vice President Stewart.
Great. I had a question. I wanted to make sure, Ms. Farag, as you were going through on the technology maintenance contract, and thank you for clarifying, that is a 5-year contract. So is that $1.6 million a year?
I think it's going to be less in outgoing years, but I'll ask Chief Frank to speak to that.
Thank you. Chief Frank.
No, it will be the same in outgoing years. So this is the completion of moving Axon's business model, so from buying equipment and then licenses to now this OSP, which gives us this umbrella. So this, we have a 5-year contract with them. This $1.6 million is an increase to go to this contract. So instead of what we were doing before, where, for example, if when all of our body-worn cameras meet the end of their life, we'd come back and ask for a big chunk to buy a bunch of body-worn cameras. This OSP, the first thing it does is it puts life expectancy in it's covered in the license. So in 5 years, when my taser is out of warranty, we get a new taser. And we have 780, close to 780 of those. Our Fleet 3 our vehicles with Fleet 3 in it, which gives LPR technology. When those meet their service life, it's about 5 years for everything. Those get replaced, and it's under this cost. In addition to that, in this model, we have access to all kinds of software, as Ms. Farag went through, that we are now going to have access to that won't, well, I guess it costs us, but it will be under this umbrella. For example, Fusus is going to be under this umbrella, which is at least a $250,000 a year cost. We have unending storage. Never-ending pasta. Yeah, I used coffee last time.
It's getting to about that time.
Yeah. So for storage with this new contract, we have an extraordinary opportunity to put all of our digital evidence into storage that's unending. We have the ability to stand up our survey platform. We have the ability to stand up a more robust early intervention system, and ultimately the potential for an RMS system that we're all paying for under this. So this completes this. Axon has been a good partner, and quite honestly, I'd love to get a 15-year contract with them because it'll save more money, but 5 years is what we're doing now, and we're stabilizing this cost for the county because this is where we've gone over the last decade with all of our equipment, all of our needs, all of our technology needs that make officers more efficient and also give the transparency that the residents of Montgomery County wants with all of our data collection. The drones are in there too, Drone Sense. So it's a big opportunity, and this will stabilize it.
Great. And Ms. Frog, I think in your packet you had mentioned that, and I think Chief Frank just mentioned the survey component of this, that is required by Bill 45-20.
Yes.
So would at least part of this fall under the category of something we have to do?
I would agree. I just don't know how to break that cost down into parts by licensed product.
So it's too confusing. So, all right.
Yeah, everything, they don't break it out anymore. Everything comes in under there, and we have the opportunity to maximize.
All right. Well, maybe Ms. Frog, as you did for other things in the tracking sheet, we could just note that since there's just a portion of that.
Sure.
And then the other one, which I don't think we've talked about yet, was the digital forensic evidence compliance, and that's in accordance with Richardson v. State of Maryland for $379,300. Because if we need to do this because of a court case, does that then go under the category we talked about before, the other issues?
My understanding is the court holding is that when they write a search warrant for a phone, it has to be written with specific particularity to hit the apps and the data that the police think are connected to a crime. So if somebody commits a burglary or they're planning a burglary on Snapchat, the police can only write that warrant and get it approved to go after Snapchat app.
Right.
My understanding is that the investigators are currently pulling with particularity off the phone to give to the detectives, but this would make it a much easier process and it would be more uniform in application. So to me, it's enhancing operations, but not necessarily required because of the law.
Got it. Chief Frank, you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that. We are able to do the work right now quite inefficiently. Right now, the officers that are tasked with pulling this information pull down a block out of the phone, then they go look at the blocks and separate out the pieces, and then send that to the investigator. The problem that is giving us is it's an extraordinary amount of work. And so far, what we're seeing is our backlog in these devices going up 10% a month. Because we don't have the capability to do it more efficiently. In addition, adding resources would require infrastructure changes to our data. It would require servers. It would require a bunch of other things that cost a lot more money that we would have to continually upgrade every 2 to 3 years. So what this program, the Magnet program, does is it allows us to do a couple things, take a lot of information and put it in storage on Axon, old information, and then we can utilize our new servers and then have our decentralized folks work more decentralized and get more people downloading from these devices, eliminate that backlog. Right now, we have a backlog of 30 to, for most cases, 30 to 45 days. That's going to continue to go up. We don't have another way to cause that, to close that gap. We want to get down to a gap. Now, let me be clear on critical incidents. We have anywhere from a day to 7 days to get that information. The way we prioritize for homicides or for a particularly atrocious sex crime. They're all atrocious, but for like stranger on stranger. But outside of that, we're 30 to 45 days. That's going to keep going up to 60 days to 90 days. And the problem that we have with it, and there's cases that we've seen even locally, is when that information sits on a device and is not looked at, there's other people being victimized if we don't get to it and we don't make those arrests. So we want to avoid that situation. And the last thing, and a lot of the things in this budget that Chief Jones and the county executives have put forward, these are all efficiency items that really are force multipliers for the fact that we don't have enough officers. So that's a number of the things here that we're looking at, and this magnet software falls in that.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you. I'll be brief and just say I appreciate the county executive doubling the funding for the cadet program, which since 2018, everyone who has participated in it, all except for 2, have become police officers. And we know that the diversity of the people who enroll and participate in the cadet program reflect the diversity of Montgomery County. And when we talk about having people who look like us, live like us, and live in our communities, that is the embodiment of this program. And so just wanted to highlight that and say I look forward to seeing how the new recruits with the new rules going from half the year or 8-10 months of the year to year-round, increasing their compensation so they could actually put even more of themselves into this, and also going from 2 years to 4 years. I think those are all needed updates, and look forward to supporting them. So thank you.
Great. Okay, I don't see any other colleagues wishing to speak. We're going to come back to the 3 items that Ms. Farag had noted for us. And I think the one I missed was the workload and staffing survey that Councilmember Jawando noted. So we have the 3, the 40,500 as part of Bill 1721, which he noted, the lab accreditation, which was noted, I believe, by Vice President Stewart for 14,459, and then the workload and staffing survey. And the view is those 3 are really required. Do you want to turn them over?
No,
Okay.
the 2 items that you had listed, yes, the 2 items you had listed.
And then that one can be reduced. Go ahead.
Yes, it
Sorry.
could be reduced, but it needs to stay on the new and enhanced program list.
Okay, so why don't we take them up as 2 separate items? That's what I originally thought. I confused myself here at this late hour. Must be the never-ending, I don't know if it's the never-ending breadsticks or the pasta bowl, but it's some form of carbs.
But I got you thinking.
Okay. We have the 2 items being recommended by staff to move into the base. I'll entertain a motion for that, moved by the Public Safety Chair, seconded by Councilmember Lukey. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. And then, do you want to quickly explain, Ms. Farag, your recommendation for the reduction in the new and enhanced program list for the workload and staffing survey?
Yes, after further research, the external workload analysis and staffing study could be reduced from $250,000 to $160,000, but should remain on the new and enhanced programs list.
Okay, Councilmember Jawando had noted his interest in that. I wanted to give you the opportunity if you wanted to move it, if you're interested. If not, I can entertain a motion otherwise.
I'm sorry, which item?
This is the workload and staffing
lowering the
survey to
amount,
reduce
sure.
it to
So moved.
160.
Yeah.
You had noted your support for it.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Sales. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. That is unanimous as well at the 160,000 reduced number to the new and enhanced program list. I believe that is all the items. Anything else outstanding, Ms. Farag? We have. I'm sorry, Councilmember Mink.
So sorry, I think that Ms. Farag had also mentioned whether we might be able to lower the late night business plan grant program in light of the other bill. I don't know if we want to discuss that possibility. I'm not even sure. I don't have like an analysis on this, but I don't know if there's a perspective from the chief or
I
from.
talked off record about possibly just putting that in 2 different tranches of 50,000 each, since we really don't know what the applications are going to look like.
Okay, I mean, I think
Or
that.
four tranches, or, you know.
I think that makes sense. Chief Frank, do you want to speak to that?
I was live. I don't see an issue with that based on all the changes. I think there's some other opportunities we could come back and if we needed to get more money, we could ask for a change there. We've seen, candidly with the camera program, we're trying to judge the demand there, and there may be some opportunities to adjust it. So it's
Okay, so I'll move that we split that into two tranches then.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second to split the late-night safety program into two tranches? Second. Seconded by Councilmember Lukey. We have a motion before us. Let me turn it to Council Vice President Stewart.
Thank you. Just because we have Dr. Stoddard still here, and I didn't know if he wanted to come down and speak to this at all.
Let's be those steps.
Thank you. And I will say, one of the things when we were doing the late night safety plan, Bill, this was a piece I had put in there because I wanted to be very conscious of the potential for these late night safety plans to be incur a cost to our small businesses, and particularly for small businesses in the downtown Silver Spring area, knowing they've been hit by Purple Line, they're going to be hit by the Metro shutdown this summer, and a lot of other things, just making sure we had enough funds available. And Chief Frank, I appreciate you saying, we can come back from them, but I'm going to tell you this budget, one of my main goals, and Councilmember Glass said this as well, is to completely reduce the number of appropriations that come back in FY25 to this body. I want to have things in this budget, and for it to be a much rarer occasion that we have appropriations, but I appreciate that. Dr. Stoddard?
Yeah, I wish I could give you a better answer, but the reality is we're not going to know, because obviously the change with the hookah legislation that limited hours did allow them to stay open until 3 a.m. on the weekends, which would still qualify them for the late night safety plan bill, given that was written at 2 a.m. Now, obviously, that could be revisited, as we see, but obviously we don't know which businesses are going to ultimately choose to stay open to 3 a.m. on the weekends in light of their required compliance. That essentially that extra hour qualifies them for a compliance plan. And obviously, depending on what the nature of their plan is, that obviously will dictate the cost. I think we've limited it up to, 10,000 is what we've limited it to per business, given that we think that, we don't know generally what cameras and door enhancements and things that would be required costs, but it will be a facility by facility eligibility determination as to what they're eligible for based on what gaps they have from where they currently are to what they need to get to for the compliance based on a review by the committee. And so this is we figured that there's probably 20 businesses or so that are probably still going to meet eligibility. That's just a guess based on what we see so far. And we said let's figure that some are going to be 10,000, some are going to be far less than that. So set around a $5,000 target for what they'll be eligible for. Could be a bit less than that. Could be a bit more than that. And so I think that's sort of where we're at. And then obviously we do not believe there's currently any business that qualifies under the two serious incidents clause, but you could qualify 2 or 3 businesses in a month if we had a bad series of incidents. So that's I can't predict the future on that. So I don't see a huge issue splitting it into 2 tranches. My guess though is that we're more likely to get into that second tranche over the course of a year than we are to stay at the 1 tranche. So decide accordingly.
Councilmember Glass.
What happens from a budgetary perspective if all the money is allocated in 1 tranche and 1 line item and it's not all dispersed by the end of the next fiscal year?
I mean, we'd have a save. I mean, this happens in personnel every year, and so we underspend. And it goes back towards the reserves ultimately.
Right. No harm, no foul.
Correct.
Right. I won't support the motion.
Okay, I don't see any other colleagues wishing to. Councilmember Mick.
Okay.
It's late. It's late.
Sorry. I think given the feedback from Dr. Stoddard that it makes sense to keep the 100 if we're expecting to use the 100. So I appreciate the line of questioning from the Vice President. Okay, and it looks like Councilmember Lukey agrees, so I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay, the motion has been withdrawn without objection from the body. So we no longer have a motion before us. I will take a straw vote now unless there are any other comments or questions on the police budget. On the amended committee recommendation that has been amended before us, all those in favor of the police department budget? That is unanimous. Okay. And now our gracious, patient state's attorney, who has been waiting throughout this discussion, although I know listening intently because he cares deeply about not only his office and his budget, but the county's public safety much more broadly than that. Appreciate his patience for waiting us out here. And let me turn it back to the chair of the Public Safety Committee for the State's Attorney's Office, which is gratefully our final item of today.
It is. And I think this is as close as the state's attorney has had for a vacation in several months.
I did stay awake the entire hearing.
Let's not go there. I was looking at you.
I did learn the word tranche today, though.
What was that?
The word tranche is the word of the day.
Yeah, that's right.
If I had a nickel for every time the word tranche was used.
That's right. We're tranched. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank Mr. McCarthy and his entire team for being here with us. The committee did approve 3-0 of the county executive's recommended operating budget of $25.3 million, which is an increase of 14.6%. The committee is recommending placing one item on the new and enhanced program list. It's the Evidence Review Unit. Since the police have started using body-worn cameras, the State's Attorney's Office has been required to redact, upload, and review all digital evidence. Prosecutors use this evidence daily in their decision-making and preparations, but they have also been the ones having to review all the video evidence as well. The office received a grant for 4 legal assistants, but their caseload requires an additional 7 legal assistants to fully staff this unit. An additional one-time cost is needed to renovate the work space and for asbestos abatement. And with that, I don't know whether Ms. McCarthy has anything, and then we'll turn to Ms. Frog.
I'll let Susan go first if she'd like to.
Sure. Chair Katz, you hit on all the salient points of this. There is just the one item that is on the new and enhanced programs list. They have 4 that were mid-year ads that are totally grant funded. That grant goes for 3 years, I believe.
That's great.
So they've identified the need for 7. Within that amount of money, there's $248,000, which is for renovation of the 5th floor office area to build office space for these additional positions. And it also involves replacing 20-year-old carpet and an asbestos abatement program throughout the floor. The other items that are included in the budget, I'll just go through briefly. The Bureau of Justice Assistance body-worn camera grant, which we just mentioned, for about $290,000 is funding the 4 legal assistants for the same type of work. They have $100,000 in here for cloud storage for additional storage space since their data storage needs are greater than had been expected. $61,000 added for the salary plan. This promotes eligible attorneys according to a salary plan approved by the council in FY14. The amount varies year to year based on the number of attorneys eligible for promotion. Of note, in 2022, the office lost 16 attorneys, or 20% of all attorney staff. Mandated salary adjustment for the state's attorney himself, which is in county law. And there are shifts of partial full-time equivalent positions from the grant to the general fund, and they're listed by grants on page 3 of the original packet for you. In terms of racial equity and justice, under their operating budget and equity tool, they scored 1 out of 11, which indicates an emerging commitment. The committee talked about this a little bit more. The office has contracted with private entities, including the University of Maryland and prosecutorial performance indicators, to compile a large amount of prosecution data, and they do have prosecution dashboards available. They've indicated that they're currently in the hiring process for a data analyst who will update the dashboard and also help evaluate any trends which may become apparent. And once the data analyst is hired, they will broaden the areas of evaluation to include district court cases as well. Also, they have hiring initiatives that do address racial equity. They've expanded the number of job fairs they attend, advertise with law schools, and is hired laterally to fill positions, and they continue to pursue the goal of having a diverse workforce that matches the community they represent.
May I say, I'm going to confine myself to what Councilman Katz brought up. What's happened is we actually, even this week, we added another police agency that is providing us with body camera footage. To give you an example of how complicated and how intense some of the need can be, some of you watched on your TV probably about a month ago when a car was stolen in Prince George's County and it came into Montgomery County. And there were 3 helicopters up in the air. It was chased by about 50 other police cars from multiple different agencies. They crashed maybe 15 times, so there were 15 different events. That one case has 200 hours of body camera footage with it. 200. So if you took an individual person and you didn't prepare the case, you didn't do the witness interviews, you just looked at the body camera footage, you're talking 200 hours, one case. In the district court, we have 38,000 matters between criminal and traffic. What's happened, look, I think everybody, we talked about retention and hiring before. I will tell you, one of the things that is crushing my attorneys is an inability to keep up with the demands of the modern criminal case. And the modern criminal case requires you to review body camera footage. I think in the long run, in a couple of years, I'll be back here and we'll probably be talking about AI. I think that's going to be, ultimately, AI will do this for us. But we're 3 to 4 years away from AI being able to do this for us. I've actually been in contact with developers on the west coast of the United States, talking to them about AI products that could maybe do the work that some of these 11 people could do. We've gone out, we've gotten the grant, we've gotten the 4 people, it's $1 million. We got $1 million, not taxpayers' expense, because it is absolutely killing us. It's a growing need. The Metropolitan Transit Police joined us this week as yet another agency that's going to be giving us body-worn camera footage. When we put together, the number just didn't come out of the thin air. What we did is we went to every other agency in the state that has body-worn camera units, and everyone has them. And we said, based on the number of cases that you look at, what are your caseloads for your individuals? In this proposal, the average person that we would get, one of these 11 people, if we had 11, would do 3,500 cases a year. 3,500 cases a year per individual. So it's a growing need. I think in the long run there may be an AI product that will do lots of this for us. It's not reliable yet. Everybody knows about AI. Some of these products are not reliable yet. This is yet another example of that. This is an operational need. I will also say something else. Susan talked about the build-out. There's $248,000 build-out, and the build-out is largely to accommodate the 11 people. I'm going to tell you right now, I need the people so desperately. I'll say to you, take the $248,000 build-out. I need the bodies. I can wait on the build-out. They can double bunk me with somebody else. But we need these personnel to do the work, and it is redaction. It is quality control. We were the first jurisdiction in the state to uniformly, without any question, backed putting body cameras on the street. I was always a strong provider of that. I don't think we've there was another building that was going to ultimately come due, and it's come due now. In order for us to meaningfully look at the stuff that we have produced, whether it's accountability, whether it's transparency, you need the bodies to do it. So I would ask that that the recommendation of the committee that I testified before be adopted by this group for the reasons I already stated.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Some staggering numbers. Vice President Stewart.
Thank you for that. I think I know the answer to my question, given what you just said. I did have questions about AI, and I appreciate that. We actually had talked to Chief Yamada about AI and looking when they just do the spot checking of body-worn camera.
That's the future.
Yeah, and how much that takes. I guess my question is, so you have the 4 people who are on the grant, and how long have they been working?
Literally probably in place a couple of weeks.
Next couple of weeks. And
They've literally been here 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
But they're here now.
And I hear the need for the 7 additional people. I guess my question is, for fiscal year FY25, do you think you'll be able to ramp up that much and get all 7 and 11 people in place?
I think the answer is yes. We're getting college graduates. Most of the individuals we're hiring are college graduates. They have background in criminal justice, and they're just anxious to get their foot in the door of an agency such as my own. So I don't think we did not have a problem getting these 4, and I do not anticipate having a problem filling those positions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Joanna.
Thank you. I was going to ask a similar question about timing of, we're trying to scrimp, but I did as much as we can. So I did hear you say the priority would be the people over the space, so appreciate you saying that.
I need the people. We'll deal with the space issues. We'll accommodate.
So, yeah, appreciate that. I want 2 questions. One related to the data dashboard. Obviously, we've talked about this for a couple of years. Right. I know PPI and the University of Maryland worked with you to look at some of your data and put it up. And one of the things you said that you're trying to do is get a data analyst to go through that and look at trends, which is obviously one of the goals of whether you need to change anything or look at any practices.
And my data analyst was not approved, not sent over with the budget. That got nixed. What I needed to do that was taken out of my budget.
Right. So is there any other, so it's not even before us to talk about that person.
Right.
And it sounds like there wouldn't be any plans to repurpose or have anyone else work on that or capacity.
No, actually, I do have. I'm not ready to announce this, but my head of my tech services, a guy named Dave Seaman, who ran the courthouse here in Montgomery County for many, many years, came and has worked for me for about 6 or 7 years. He's retiring, and I have a gentleman who's going to come in here that I haven't announced his formal name yet, but is going to come in.
Well, you just did.
I did. Huh? I didn't say anything.
Oh, you said the name of someone else who's going to.
Oh, yeah, Dave's leaving.
Okay, who's going to replace Dave? Okay, all right. I thought we got it. Okay.
And the person that's coming in has run dashboards for a major city on the East Coast of the United States before. He can put them up for me. It's one of the reasons he came to the top of the list.
Okay, great. So I'm hearing that there will be some progress on that, because obviously it's nice. You got to have that capability to do anything with it.
100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then that connects to my second question. You all are a little different. You're an independently elected office, but you do get your budget from the county, at least, and then you also submit the budget tool with the racial equity. A 1 out of 11, I think we all agree that that's not good. There was a resubmission. It came back again 1 out of 11, So can you just talk about your commitment? I know you guys are a little different on working with that office and on those things that are in the law.
Yeah, number one, I think I'm the only agency in the government that brought in. I opened up my entire office to an outside agency, which was Microsoft and the MacArthur Foundation. There were 6 or 7 universities came in, and I had no editorial control over anything they wrote. And I defy anybody in government in this county has done more to be transparent about how their internal operation works than my office. No one comes close to what I did. We've got a published report that's up on my website that goes into charging and sentencing. It goes, and by the way, a lot of this was done, they talked to the people inside my office. They picked who they talked to. They interviewed. I don't think anybody's been more scrutinized in terms of race and
What's the
equity in the
disconnect
county
on
than the state's attorney's
with the
office.
racial equity office score? What's the disconnect?
I can't answer that.
Is someone designated from your team to be the person who deals with that office, which is one of the requirements of the law, like a racial equity person? Is there someone in the state's attorney's office designated to be that?
We don't have a person designated to do that.
Okay. So what I'm just trying to get at here is, it's a budgetary conversation, but I think, these things are interconnected, and I would hope that we could work on that. I know there would be willingness on the side of that office, and it would be important to, if when you get this data, it's going to be important to have that in place to be able to do something with it.
I agree.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Sale.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on that question, because I know you're hiring for people who will be evaluating some of the body camera footage and any other evidence, and wanted to know what the demographics are of the current staff that are holding those positions, and then what the, I guess, hiring practices are going to be to help with diversifying that pool of recruitment candidates.
I know my attorney staff is about 23 or 24% African American.
Mhm.
I know that. That's the attorney staff.
Yeah,
In terms
I
of-
think this is for the evidence review unit. This is asking for 7 additional positions. You said you had 4 currently. So what's the makeup of the 4 that are currently in these roles?
We have one African-American woman, and we have...
Can you come closer to the microphone,
I'm sorry.
please?
We have one African-American woman,
Mhm.
and we have one Hispanic man and 2 Hispanic women.
Okay.
And that makes up the 4.
All right. I look forward to hearing more about the overall plans, and will approve the tranche on the new and enhanced list.
Thank you. Councilmember Lukey.
Thank you. And I know we're talking a lot about digital evidence and body-worn camera evidence, and just to sort of reframe timing on the growing evolution of body-worn camera evidence, Montgomery County adopted use of body-worn cameras back like when the state issued guidance on it, well before the passage of the Police Accountability Act in 2021, as I recall.
It was about 2014 or 15 we
Right.
started using body cameras here. We were the first in the state
Right.
to use body cameras.
And the
With
state.
my support.
Right, and then the state issued a guidance document through the Maryland Police Standards Training Commission in 2016 to help inform departments across the state on body-worn cameras and policies and storage of data, et cetera. And then the Police Accountability Act had 2 different time periods in it for everyone else basically to get themselves together to start doing this. One period was the start of FY23, so July 1 of 2022. Is that right? Yeah, okay. And then the next one is coming up. The final deadline in the law is July 1st, 2024. So starting for FY25. So that's the final deadline for that. But as this happens, and again, we may be having, and you mentioned a multi-jurisdictional case that started in Prince George's and ended up in Montgomery. Regardless of which jurisdiction takes over the prosecution of the case, the evidence, the digital evidence is still relevant and may come from multiple departments, correct?
It absolutely does in this case. That's exactly correct.
Okay.
I actually watched that while that chase was going on live TV. The state's attorney from Prince George's County called me, and we narrated the thing together as we watched it on the TV, saying, "That's mine. No, that one's yours."
Oh.
So we were dividing the case up as it literally happened.
Right, right. And that's not uncommon in a lot of different types of scenarios, whether it's drug distribution or other crimes where there may be multiple jurisdictions implicated in that. And at the end of the day, the state's attorney's office, the business that you're in is of prosecuting cases on behalf of the people, right?
Prime directive.
And you need to make sure that your evidence is tight and sufficient and maintained in the appropriate chain of custody, reviewed appropriately, so that you can present that evidence in order to make the prosecution stick. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So in terms of the need to engage in this type of evidence review and have that done by a separate unit, other than having your attorneys have to do this and also prepare their cases, is that why you have this separate unit that you have created that will focus exclusively on that type of evidentiary review?
Yes, and I think it actually is going to be cheaper for the taxpayer, too.
Right, because you're not paying attorneys to do the work,
exactly
correct? Okay. And thank you for raising the willingness to categorize the build out of the offices separately. I appreciate that, and I think I would move to note that separately. However, I don't want to open up Pandora's box on the prior discussion of tranches or tiers or anything of the sort, but that we could move or note that the build out could be considered separately as a secondary item if necessary in order to meet fiscal capacity. And I'm looking for a second if someone wants to second that motion.
Second.
State's Attorney McCarthy had indicated that the build out, the $248,000 that's in the budget to do the build out for additional office space, if needed to find additional fiscal capacity based on our issues, was less important than, of course, the staffing itself being a top priority. And I am asking for us to consider it in that way. Thanks.
Okay, it's been seconded twice by Councilmember Mink and by Councilmember Katz. We're at the stage of the meeting, I think, 10 hours in or so, where we need 2 seconds in order to really make sure we know what we are agreeing to. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Let me turn it to Councilmember Sell.
Thank you. The office upgrades, that includes cleaning up asbestos.
Yeah,
That's what I
there's
saw
the-
in,
The tile floors, rugs are glued to tile floors, and within those tile floors, there is asbestos.
Yes.
We'd actually have to physically move from our working space to another building, probably for a couple of months to accomplish that, because you can't safely remove the asbestos with us being there.
and so if we delay the funding, if it's unable to be funded in this fiscal year, are there other places where the staff can go where?
We've discussed a number of alternatives. Again, ultimately, the asbestos and the other stuff will have to be done, but look, the priority are the bodies and our being able to process our cases.
Yeah.
But we also have ethical obligations in terms of discovering and redacting information that's within those videos, too. Sometimes there's things out there the public should not see, or
Yes.
should they be distributed, and we have to make sure that's taken out of the video as well.
Okay. If these folks that are getting hired can do their work remotely or in another office space, then I'm fine with the 2 tranches. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you. I was going to say the same thing, if they could do it remotely. Obviously, if you want to have the people to be able to do their job, they have to have a place to be able to do it. And the sooner we can get this done, it's not going to get cheaper next year for us to do this. So I don't know, how fast you can actually get it done. But if it's a possibility, I believe we should leave them the money in, and if we can't afford to do it, then let's have the discussion about whether it be remote. But candidly, we're much better off doing it as soon as we can. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, please. All right, we have a motion on the floor that has been seconded twice. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand.
Do I only vote for one?
That is unanimous. You could second twice, but you can only vote once. That is unanimous. I don't see any other colleagues wishing to speak. I don't see anything else that we need to take up as part of the state's attorney's office. So with that, I'll see if there is support. All those in favor of the committee recommendation with the one amendment, please indicate by raising your hand. That is unanimous. Colleagues, that gets us through day one. Okay, we have 4 more days this week to go. It's going to be a busy week. I appreciate the thoughtful conversation today. We will meet tomorrow at 9 a.m., and until then, we are now adjourned.